So I'm probably
What's
good.
up, everyone? This is Final Fan TV. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Final Podcast 17. We have a really fun one for you today, not tonight. Combine the words tonight and tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have Dan Seto as a special guest party member. And he was the former Square-Enix Community Manager during some very exciting times in Final Fantasy history. He is also the current WB Games International Social Media Communications Manager. So yeah, this is going to be a really fun one. We are Final Fan TV, where we spotlight the Final Fantasy developers, voice actors, and community members every weekend. If you like that, please subscribe so that we may continue to host amazing guests like Dan Seto. Dan, how are you doing today, man?
Hello, I am all good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh man, we are ecstatic to have you on the show, Dan.
I'm sure you've had much more impressive guests than me on here.
Oh no, man, come on! This is exciting because you have been in this, like you're in the industry, which is really exciting for me personally because I've always dreamed of being in the gaming industry. Community manager is a job that is something I would look into. I would be very interested in that. So I'm excited to talk to you about what you do, the experiences you've had in your role, and yeah, especially during some really, really cool times for Final Fantasy, such as the Final Fantasy VII Remake announcement and Final Fantasy 15, a launch of a mainline Final Fantasy. But before we get to that, I would love to ask you more about your job, so that way people can maybe get to know you and what you do. And even before that, I'd like to, excuse me, guys, I'm sorry, I'm just really excited to talk to Dan. Let me introduce the rest of the Final Fan TV party. We have Vinny, the Limit Breaker, McGovern. What's up, Vinny?
Hey, how's it going?
Also, joining us in the party with another really cool picture, and there's a meaning to it. Reed will explain it. It is Reed. I'm trying out something new here. The Phoenix Down, Daniels.
There you go.
The Phoenix? Did you just like the Phoenix? Just read the Phoenix.
Better than Ramblin' Reed, right?
Better than Ramblin' Reed.
I don't know. It's John Eric Bentley is gonna like catch this and be like frustrated. We didn't say Ramblin' Reed, so
He's gonna pull all of his endorsements.
Exactly. So before we started recording, I know Dan is a big JoJo fan, so I was trying to get the Dio face over mine for a picture, but my Photoshop skills are equivalent to a 2-year-old. Therefore, I have chosen instead to represent myself with a potato. So
he's being too humble. The real reason is Dio's body isn't muscular enough to accent Reed's face, so we just had to use a potato.
Exactly. Yeah. I recently had surgery, not to repair my knee. It was actually just what's that called, like a rhinoplasty or whatever, just to actually surgically change my face to look like Dio.
It was muscle reduction surgery. He was too swole.
Yeah, it was too swole. The blood flow was starting to really
surgery.
Thanks, Vinny.
I got you.
It's like
So that's a little bit about us, guys. So let's get over to Dan Seto. What's up, Dan? So as a community manager or a social media communication manager, you are essentially the voice of the company, for at least the voice that fans hear and interact with. Could you tell me more about your job and what you did at Square Enix, and also what you do now at WB Games?
Yeah, of course. So at Square, I was community manager for the Japanese titles. So everything from all the Final Fantasy games to everything else coming out of the Japan studio. So Nier Automata, Kingdom Hearts games, the Secret the Mana series. So Star Ocean at the time as well. So yeah, all of those. And yeah, as community manager, the term community manager can be quite broad, and depending on where you go and which company, your responsibilities, vary drastically. So, yeah, Dan, as you mentioned, generally speaking, the job of a community manager is to be one of the public faces and voices of the company to the community, the person who will speak to them, engage them, and give them updates, get feedback, all that kind of stuff. And right now I am social media communications manager at Warner Brothers Games, where the role is a little bit different to a community manager. So it's, as the name suggests, it's managing social media channels. Specifically at Warner Brothers Games, I sit in what is normally called in the industry the central EMEA team. So depending on the company, of course, but a lot of companies, especially global ones, are structured in a way that you have a central team that kind of oversees territories. So EMEA stands for Europe, Middle East, and Asia. So we have offices like in other countries. So we got a UK office in France, Germany, Spain, Italy, etc. And I oversee them and help them execute social media campaigns. In a nutshell, that was and is my job, among other things.
Awesome. So during your time at Square Enix as the community manager from 2014 to 2018?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Awesome.
Something like
during
that.
that time, as far as Final Fantasy goes, during that time, the following games were released. You had Final Fantasy X, 10-2 on PS4 and PC. Then you had Theatrhythm, Final Fantasy Curtain Call on the 3DS, Final Fantasy Explorers for the 3DS, Final Fantasy Type 0 HD moved it over to the PS4 and Xbox One, World of Final Fantasy, Mobius Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy 12 Zodiac Age released on the PS4, Dissidia Final Fantasy NT on the PS4, and of course, the big one, Final Fantasy 15 and all of its various expansions. Before we get into Final Fantasy 15, I would like to talk to you about how you got to sit down with Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy Type 0 HD's game director, Hajime Tabata, on Square Enix Presents Active Time Report, which was a YouTube series. I mean, how cool was that to like sit down with? Have you met him beforehand, and how many game directors in Final Fantasy do you get to meet?
Wow, yeah. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. That was a very, very cool moment for me. I mean, I guess naturally a lot of people kind of forget, but it was great. It was so much fun. Luckily, because of my role and the team that I was part of in Square Enix, I have been fortunate to meet a lot of the dev team through the job. Naturally, you might assume just because you need to talk to these people sometimes to be able to do the work and do the jobs. But at the time, I think I hadn't really been at the company for that long, so I hadn't met that many of the dev team or dev teams, I suppose. Mm-hmm. But the Final Fantasy 15 team were really, really cool. They were a joy to work with, and they were, even to this day, one of maybe even the most unique dev teams and studios that I've ever worked with, because they were so open and they were so willing. They were the most encouraging to actually listen to everyone and get everyone to talk and hear opinions on basically everything. I mean, as consumers and fans, I'm assuming you guys and people watching and people played 15 kind of got a feeling of that from the way they tried to engage with people, get feedback, and all the updates and DLC and all that stuff for the game. When the active time report happened in London, I think that might have only been the second or third one, so it was still in its early infancy. It was designed, I think if I remember correctly, it was supposed to be quite a regular update series, because the team was so, and I can't stress how unique this is, especially for a Japanese developer, that they really wanted to be as transparent as possible with the community and the fans. So it was supposed to be like a regular update. I can't remember exactly how many they did in the end, but I guess that's kind of like a moot point. I had met Hajime Tabata maybe once or twice before, Before this, so at this point, I wasn't even sure if he would remember me or even remember my name or anything like that. So, and it was kind of a thing when, because he came over. The reason we did it, well, part of the reason we did it was because he was over for internal meetings and other kind of things within the company. So, and it was just the timing. It was like, well, we want to do, we've got some things we want to share with the community. We want to publicize. So let's just do it in London. So it's like, okay, fine, we can do that. And yeah, I was lucky enough to be a part of it, and it was really, really cool. And like I said, because it was so early in its infancy, as a video series, like nothing was nailed down. There was no kind of like script or format to follow. Usually they record them in Japan, so they were like in their little streaming room. So we decked out one of our meeting rooms. We had kind of cool London skyline in the background. Looked like we had screens. We were showing off like trailers and whatnot. But I remember, I'll tell you that when the team came over, and not that long actually before we were scheduled to actually do the thing. I think we had announced it at this point. We could, like I said, because everything was kind of in flux. We didn't actually really know everything that was going to be in the show. I call it a show. You know what I mean?
I call this a show too.
Yeah. So what happened was, like, I was thinking it was going to be like a feedback session. So I went around the community. I was like, what questions you have, we'll see if we can answer. It was going to be more of a Q&A. But then when I met Tabata-san, when he came over, and he was like, oh, by the way, we've got these, we want to show off this video, we want to show off the gameplay, we want to show off, and I'm like, what? Because at this point, we hadn't even we didn't see it either. So it was like, we were turning into our meetings, and he was like, by the way, this is what we want to show. And we showed this video, and we're like, wow, this is really amazing stuff. This is really cool. It was, if I remember correctly, it was the first time we showed some gameplay in the cave. And I can't remember if that was where we might have shown off the first World of Wonder video. I can't remember exactly, but there was a bunch of stuff. And so usually, we planned it for it to be quite relative, like an hour long. And it turned out to be like 2.5 hours or something because, we had so much stuff to go through. There were so many reveals that we were like, we got to cram it. And Tabata-san loves to talk. He's a great talker. He is one of the most charismatic. I think he actually might be, he's definitely one of, maybe the most charismatic developer at Square-Enix at the time that I had met. Because he could talk to you and he could sell you a potato with not with or without Dio's face on it. So like,
very, very important.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this really came across in like the interviews and the active time reports, but the passion that he has for everything that he does is so palpable that whenever you spoke to him, whenever he talked about Type 0, whenever he talked about Final Fantasy 15, like, you would be hanging off his every word. And he's just such a lovely man. It's a real shame that he's no longer at Square.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed in that too. I really, really loved Final Fantasy 15, and I'm almost like 100% confident that I watched one of your active time reports. It was probably the Type 0 15 one when it was airing, like, because I was just so hyped for it. And yeah, I grew to really, really enjoy hearing Tabata-san like talk about the Final Fantasy is so entertaining, like you said, charismatic and stuff. And I was sold, and for me, it delivered. But yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Speaking of Final Fantasy 15, let's talk about the your work experience during Final Fantasy 15, like the I guess the lead up to and then after the launch of Final Fantasy 15. If you could talk about maybe some of the victories you had, and also maybe some of the things that you had to deal with I don't know, like passionate fans,
Yeah.
How you could take like a pretty unsteady situation and turning it into a positive, which I'm sure is like your number one, or at least it's up there as your job to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, could you tell me about all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you say, turning for any community manager, whether wherever they work, in games, out of games, um, turning when if an unfortunate event happens and there is a bit of a negative situation, turning that into a positive if you can, that is the biggest challenge, or at least one of the biggest challenges any community manager will have to face. And the thing is, it's quite interesting doing it for Square and doing it for the Final Fantasy brand, especially because you've kind of alluded, those passionate fans can be, very, very passionate, and it really highlights how unique Final Fantasy is in all of gaming, because you get passionate fans everywhere, right? I mean, God, just remember, the Mass Effect 3 ending. Remember that? How the fan response for that was,
Yep.
and that's just as an example. So things in video games get heated all the time. You only have to look on Twitter for like maybe 5 minutes before you find something. But the thing is with the Final Fantasy franchise, that no other franchise, at least I don't think, has to deal with is the wrong term, but the situation is there is such a huge generational difference and gap for the fan base. Like other franchises that have been around a long time, Super Mario, Legend of Zelda, it's two probably the biggest that have been around the same time. And the thing is with those franchises is that the games, have all been like Final Fantasy, Legend of Zelda, Mario, all had fantastic games. But the thing is with the Nintendo ones is that there's a palpable DNA between them all. Even Breath of the Wild, which is hugely different from my favorite, The Wind Waker, is still,
still Zelda. Like
Yeah,
you can still
yeah.
very much Zelda.
Yeah.
It's so funny how like just jumping in on that. It's so funny how there is like this crazy divide in the Zelda fan base between something like Wind Waker, which is like a very divisive game amongst the fan base, which is kind of convenient. But it's like it's pretty much between that and Breath of the Wild now, and then you still have like a Link to the Past sort of thing like that. But
Yeah, you don't want to get in an argument with 2D versus 3D Zelda. Just like
yeah, exactly.
But the thing is with Final Fantasy is that you ask 10 different people what Final Fantasy is, and I'll give you 10 different answers. Some people will be adamant that it's about being turn-based. Some people will be adamant that it's about having a huge cast of characters. Some people will have, it's all about the leveling up systems, etc., etc. And because each mainline game is so different from the last, it means that there's a bigger rift between you basically get almost completely separate communities within the franchise, and that was the biggest challenge, and I will always be a challenge for any Final Fantasy community manager in dealing with that, because you have so many different people who have so many strong opinions of what Final Fantasy is, that whenever the next one comes on, when 16 comes and it shows again that it's going to be drastically different from what 15 was, drastically different from 7 and 10, there'll be people like saying, this isn't Final Fantasy, and it's like, hey, come on, let's be real, it is. Look at it, it's got, and 15 was the same. As much as it did differently, there's so much in it that probably a lot of people don't even realize is still the same, and it's still in that Final Fantasy DNA. The combat system actually is a lot more similar to traditional Final Fantasy turn-based combat than people actually realize, even though it is completely real time. And yeah, the biggest problem, I say the big not problem, but what I mean, the biggest issue we had with 15 was obviously its history. That was something that we always knew would be a challenge, because of because of everything that was known and what people think they know about versus 13.
Yeah.
And one thing, I think one of the hardest lessons a community manager has to learn, and also probably one of the fastest they should learn, is that not all feedback and not all comments are necessarily worth validating or listening to, because you look online, some people will never have their minds changed. I mean, you look at, let's say, flat earthers, right? Those, those kind of communities. Okay, maybe a generalization, but you know what I mean. It's like these kind of people have got this thing in their mind so strongly that no matter what evidence, no matter what proof you show them, no matter what you say, they're set. And we had this problem with in a certain subset of the community for Final Fantasy 15, especially in the early days, that even after we said, look, no, Final Fantasy 15 is completely different from Versus 13. We're putting our flag, we put our flag in the sand and we're saying, look, forget about it. We're moving forward. We're not going to be talking about Versus anymore. This thing, and people still would. They'll still bring it up. They still bring it up to this day. And it's like, so it's like, well, you could spend all your energy trying to convince these people, and they'll spend a lot of their energy arguing with you and saying how you're stupid, how you're wrong, how you're ruining the franchise and all this kind of stuff. When really, you have to learn, like, okay, like, this is a losing battle. We need to even for your own, as a community manager, your own mental health, you need to focus on what you can actually achieve and what positive things you can actually do. And that was really, the most challenging thing about 15 in terms of, like, I guess, victories or wins. Is like, I think it's something, I think it really succeeds. I mean, out completely, regardless of what you think of the game. If personally, I love it. Diana, you've mentioned you really enjoyed it too. One thing that the team was very adamant about pushing this message that they wanted the Final Fantasy franchise to become a challenger again. You probably remember that kind of messaging that they kept saying. And what they meant by that was that the one thing in the Final Fantasy DNA that kind of waned a bit up before 15 was that it was the strive to innovate and the strive just to basically not give a damn and just do what you think was right and just try things out. Literally, we think this will be a cool idea. Let's just do it, regardless of, maybe knowing how well it may or may not turn out. Like, we think this is a good idea, so we're going to push for it. So things like, I know it gets a bit of flack now, but the multimedia approach for Final Fantasy 15, with the anime Brotherhood, Kingsglaive, the CG movie, the mobile games, as well as the main game itself, and right now,
now there's a book out, Dawn of the Future.
Yeah. So it's so it's like the team really wanted to. They thought, overly cynical people will accuse the company of being like, oh, you're just milking it, right? You're splitting it off so people have to experience everything to get the whole picture, to get the whole story. You have to spend all that money. I mean, that is one way to look at it, and I think when it comes to companies, a lot of people want to take that cynical approach, but the truth is actually a lot more noble. Actually, that stuff wasn't anything to do with the reasoning why those things were done. The reasons why they were done was just because they thought, they wanted to make Final Fantasy 15 bigger than the game. They wanted to make it a big monumental event. So like, okay, so if we do all this kind of stuff, one, we can, maybe potentially reach different kind of audiences, anime fans who might watch Brotherhood and be like, oh, this is kind of cool. Maybe I'll go play the game or I'll go watch, that cross media support, if you will. And that was where it was. And I think that was like the biggest victory as a whole, for Final Fantasy 15. It was like, it really took that spirit of, let's just try it. Let's just do it. And we'll do everything we can to make it work. And hopefully it does. Obviously, hindsight's a wonderful thing. But for the most part, I think they did really, really well in that regard in the products that came out surrounding 15. And that whole mentality of just trying something new. Let's not go down the same beaten path. Let's actually make the franchise an innovator again. And of course, all the promotional stuff we did, there was some we did so much for 15, and looking back, crazy the amount of things we did. And it was a lot of fun.
Hype. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love it. I honestly could not imagine like when Final Fantasy 16 comes out later on. I know it gets a little flack, like you said, with all this multimedia approach, but I just don't know if I can. I loved how Final Fantasy 15 felt like this big event. Like it was, this was an event in gaming history or type thing, and like we got full CGI movies with Game of Thrones actors and all this. It was so good. You got the anime, the books, and everything surrounding it. It just felt like this monumentous moment. Especially, I have it. The collector's edition was so cool. This big, the Big Bang art that Yoshitaka Amano did with the figure in it. I was going nuts about that. So it just felt like this really big event. And I honestly just couldn't imagine another Final Fantasy release not being surrounded by this hype. And another thing, a subject I wanted to touch on was I actually spoke with Liam Mulvey, the voice of Libertas from Kingsglaive, and we spoke with him a few weeks ago on Final Podcast, and I asked him, I said, well, one of the things that I was thinking before the release of Final Fantasy 15 was that, Kingsglaive may have just been cut content. Is that is that thing like they didn't have enough time to put it in the game? I imagine that 15 was supposed to start within the city of Insomnia, and you kind of, live out the invasion. And he matches up completely with what you said. That he was like, no, he spoke with some of the directors and stuff, and like this was the goal from the beginning to have this approach of multimedia. He wanted to make a CGI movie, and like they wanted to do this multimedia approach, and it was in the plans from the get-go. So that was really cool to get that kind of that information from Liam, and then you matching it up. Like, I mean, this is Square Enix had a goal, the directors had a goal in mind, and for me personally, it hit the mark. Like I love it when I'm about to start 15. I watch Kingsglaive, and then I'll start 15. Maybe even watch Brotherhood. I love Brotherhood too, but man, Kingsglaive was just on another level. So
It
good.
was.
One of my favorite Final Fantasy CG films.
Honestly,
Go ahead, Reed.
probably enjoyed Kingsglaive my first time through more than Advent Children. But I was going to say, like, 15 had like the biggest proactive marketing campaign of like any mainline series, because like you look at Final Fantasy VII, for example, that they started this massive campaign about that. In hindsight, like once it took off, there's like, oh, this is like a phenomenon. Okay, now we're going to do a movie. Now we're going to do the stories, books, all that stuff like that. 15 kind of like jumped out and got that out of the way ahead of time. Like the only precedent I really think before that was probably Final Fantasy X, and like the high point of that hype train was going into Walmart and being able to play the Xanarkin demo in the electronics section. and then you have 15 where it's like Kingsglaive comes out and it's like, dude, this is nuts. And I mean, obviously I was one of the people like salivating over Versus 13 and wondering, like, after a certain amount of time, I was like, dude, they're just gonna blow this up and make this into a main line. So like, and you see all the work that they were doing in the meantime before they announced it, because obviously you have all this content. So, sorry, Vinny, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh no, you're fine. Yeah, I mean, we live in an age where we can properly execute stuff like this now. Like, back like PlayStation 1, even PlayStation 2, and as far as Xbox 360, like if a game came out and it was broken, I mean, you kind of just had to deal with it. There were no like patch updates fixing things or anything like that. New content wasn't really coming out. But now that everything's digital and everything is so much more easy to access, why not take advantage of it? There are so many games that could benefit from this type of like compilation style. Like Fallout has a huge story that a lot of people miss because they try and fit all of their story into little lore bits where you have to explore and read like 15 paragraphs of something, and like the last paragraph has something actually really interesting. And Fallout, if Fallout had like a movie and then maybe like a mini series or just other things that came out with it, it would just benefit and enrich the experience so much more. And like Daniel said, like I can't see us going forward and not taking advantage of this more often, because this is how you really get the whole experience. You can't just fit everything into a game and then expect everybody to 60 hours into the game still reading 15 paragraph lore bits, you know. So
Yeah,
yeah, that was my 2 cents on it.
one of the really cool things about 15, and like if you really if you pay attention, there's so much lore into that game, so much going into 15. So yeah, man, and Dan, I really appreciate you sharing those experience leading up to it. I mean, it was surrounded by a little bit of like you said, like people thinking this game was just it's taken years for it to come out. But man, I thought I thought you guys really nailed it. It was really cool. I loved the promotional leading up to it, and I know you had a big role in that now, which is really cool to speak to you. You had a big role in making this release so hype and exciting. And I just couldn't imagine them not doing the same thing for 16.
Yeah. I hope they do. But again,
Yeah.
we live in a very different world right now. So who knows? Who knows what's possible? Yeah, 15 had very different kind of circumstances as well. Like I guess every game does. Because the other thing as well that really pushed the team and us as well, like in all across the company, was the shadow of 13. Like I enjoy 13, but I know it doesn't have exactly the best reputation, and was that everyone was very aware that it was like a looming shadow for 15, which 15 had to break out of. Which is again one of the reasons why the team was so adamant about going balls to the walls, because they were like, look, if we don't go, it's all or nothing. And they also felt the added pressure of not only being the next mainline game, but it's like if 15 was not a success, then what would that mean for the franchise? So it's like they had that so as well, and you'll find a lot of developers are big fans of the games they work on and the franchises they work on. So it's like no one wanted to see this be the last one. So like, look,
Right.
let's just go nuts. Literally, let's just do everything we possibly can. And Tabata-san was like the one, like the main guy to instigate that. It was just like, look, if we want to be one of the best, they had very, very high aspirations. Right? We want to be the best Final Fantasy, and we want to be the best selling. So it's like, if we're going to do these things, we have to go all out. And he was so charismatic that he got everyone on board, and we all did. We all did everything we could. And I'm just really
I
glad
remember.
that.
Hey, I'm sorry. There was a Game Informer article with Tabata-san interview, and he said he compared it to, like, he was like, they said, what's your favorite Final Fantasy, and he said Final Fantasy VII, and right there I was like, okay, I'm on board. Okay, I'm ready. I want to hear what you have to say. And then and he was just like, he said Final Fantasy VII, and then just like paraphrase, I guess, but he eventually said, like, he wanted 15 to be on that level or surpass 7, and I was like, okay, I'm all right. I'm excited now.
Yeah. I mean, that's always
the
always the goal,
aspirations
right?
were there.
Yeah.
So
I
the
mean, to be
big
fair,
thing,
when you're making a new game, like you've got to be looking to be the best one, right? So I mean,
Yes,
yeah, you never sell.
speaking of the
absolutely.
the shadow of like 13, I mean, if the big knock on 13, which it is, was the linear nature of it. So if you're trying to combat that, well, Final Fantasy 15 definitely did the complete opposite of that. They definitely embraced the open world on a whole nother level. But we're talking about 16, and that's another interesting thing is 15 again was coming off of 13 in the criticisms of that, and then Final Fantasy 14 when it first came out before it was a Realm Reborn wasn't so hot, and then obviously Realm Reborn came out and it was a great game. So 15 had like so much kind of almost working against it. like I can only imagine how much anxiety there was developing 15, and then it comes out and it's like people embrace it, and they can finally just be like, ooh, okay, well that's done. So what do we do for the next one? I don't know. Let's like have fun and make a game we want. So it's like with six, and they're really, what I love is they're really embracing a lot of the franchise staples, like the crystals, uh, and the summons. Like I love the direction they're going, and like the medieval almost setting. It's almost like a Final Fantasy and Witcher setting for 16 kind of thing, but it's like they're just free to like make the Final Fantasy game that they want to make, and they don't have a loom, like you're saying, they don't have like a shadow to run out from or anything. Like they just, so I can only imagine like how much more enjoyable of an experience it probably is making 16. and
Oh,
and
Yeah,
and I
and
almost
it's
feel like there's less pressure to have that huge campaign, because they don't have so much that they feel like is working against them.
it's an interesting one, right? Because there may not be from the public view, there might not always be the those kind of expectations, or
Right.
you know what I mean. Whereas it can be a whole different story internally, because for a variety of reasons. And remember, all the Final Fantasy games, you'll have each team and each director who works on it always has like their own unique stamp. This 16 does have that look and feel of the 14 team, which is where um it's the majority is coming from. I mean, obviously it's not like 14 per se, but you know what I mean, like that kind of style going back, and it's that kind of that little, I guess, almost cyclical nature. It's almost like how after 6 you had 7 and 8, which were no longer high fantasy, but cyberpunk, if you will, in some parts, or more modern. And then you had 9, which is a throwback. So this 16, it depends on the time, and it depends on who's involved. And it's like sometimes the creators who just get the shot at the next one just be like, you know what, I want to do it this way, and then it's like, yeah, fine, go for it. And it's that's the beauty of, and that's why the franchise, and why they're all so different, because they're allowed to be, for for, I think, for the better.
And I love how you mentioned that, because I, in a previous podcast, I it's like verbatim what I was talking about with the series, how it is cyclical, like how the nature of the protagonist is like recurring and cyclical. The environment is recurring and cyclical. It totally is, and I love that you bring that up, because like you said, 9 is kind of an homage to like kind of the high fantasy back to, and then 10 is kind of back to, well, that's kind of a cross, I guess, between the fantasy and
yeah.
cyberpunk, if you will, sort of. But yeah, no, I just love how there are like ingrained templates almost for different Final Fantasy settings, characters, etc. And like you're saying, like each one's kind of associated with each team and director. They like to draw off whichever one they choose, or multiple, but you can always see those elements like as at the root of where a
Yeah,
game's
there
going.
you go.
So they can be so similar and so different with every game. Like it's something that I love about Final Fantasy.
I
So
agree, man. Like it's like the backbone, and then there's like a backbone of Final Fantasy, and then the game itself is something that can be distinguished completely between any Final Fantasy, which is just so cool. I love that about that, and that's why we were talking earlier this week about what we called the golden era of Final Fantasy was like Final Fantasy 6 through 10, and all of that happened in 7 years. That's insane. That's why I've always said I would love to see Square Enix kind of go back to a I don't know, get multiple teams working on Final Fantasy games and release them more frequently, because man, there's stories to be told, and they're amazing stories. And if that's it shows that they can do it with 7, 8, and 9 coming back to back to back to back, and it's like all of those games are considered some of the best Final Fantasies of all time. and I would love to see Final Fantasy kind of go back to those, and all of those games are completely different. So yeah,
I,
I love that there's a backbone of Final Fantasy, like Reed said and Dan said, and then there's just a completely different entity that for each title.
so
Yeah,
this might not be like the popular viewpoint on it, but I really hope that they at least release a newer Final Fantasy that goes back to the like traditional turn-based style. Like I like the active time and I like the Kingdom Hearts style hack and slash and everything, but like I wouldn't mind if they ramped up the difficulty and made it like you wait your turn. Like there's no active time battle gauge, because to me that makes it feel more like chess. Where I'm like in Final Fantasy X, like you're looking down the side scroll bar because you're like, all right, and I have 2 turns before he goes, and he's probably going to kill somebody. So I need to think about like you have time to think about your moves in advance, and because you have time, you can make the game more difficult by
I'd almost like counter argue that Final Fantasy VII Remake kind of had like struck the perfect balance between old school turn based and new school like action based. I feel like it was almost the perfect balance.
See, I would counter that because I think Final Fantasy X. Honestly, I think Final Fantasy X's combat is way better than 7 Remakes, because with
Gloves come off.
with 7 Remake, if you're playing on hard difficulty and you're casting stuff, like because you're not controlling the other 2 people, you really have to trust in the AI. And sometimes the AI isn't doing what you want, it's not following your strategy. So like when you get super bosses and stuff, that AI really needs to follow your strategy or else it's not going to work. So instead of you formulating your own strategy, now you have to formulate your strategy around how you think your AI is going to act. And I'd rather just control Titus, Yuna, Auron, Riku, and just be like, I know Riku's going to do this. I know Auron's. Yeah, I know it's Titus.
Yeah, we're uncultured swine.
For the record, there's also Square-Enix.
Also uncultured swine.
You uncultured swines.
But yeah,
what's funny is sorry, Vinny, but like this fits into exactly what you guys are like kind of debating. What's so funny, and we mentioned it because Dan was on the team for this. The perfect kind of median between like that active time battle and the turn based, which I'm actually playing through again right now, and I've like in the last 3 days since my surgery, I've been like so sucked into it. Final Fantasy 12 Zodiac Age with the Gambit system, like I played it on Final Fantasy on PS2, and it was like I played through. I was like, this game's like meh, but playing through it on like PS4, I hadn't done it until just now, and I'm playing through. I'm just like, this is incredible. Like they they cleaned it up so much, and there's the job system, which is great. They kind of play off the sphere grid from 10, and like Vinny's saying, instead of like relying on AI, you set up like the gambit system. So like you literally before a boss, I'll sit there for 10 minutes setting up all these gambits, and I have my strategy even without controlling those characters, and you can still swap between characters and everything like that. So I mean, I just wanted to touch on that as far as like the perfect like integration between those 2 combat systems. And Dan, I see you with the hand up.
I just wanted just to say, you'll be happy to know actually that the directors of Final Fantasy 12 and the Zodiac Age are 2 of the most humblest people. They probably were the humblest developers that I had met in my time at Square. They, despite being directors of a mainline Final Fantasy game.
Well, they were so critical of themselves after 12, because they were saying how development, they weren't pleased with everything that happened in development and all that stuff. It's like, this is still like a pretty, I mean, it was there's a lot of ingenuity.
IGN's best Final Fantasy.
Yeah, there's a lot of ingenuity involved. Like they really took a huge leap there, and like they basically combined the plot of like a mainline Final Fantasy and Star Wars, which is no small feat. And then Zodiac Age now has come out, and it's like I feel like this is like finally the vision and all the criticism they gave themselves over 12. They finally, like in their eyes, I hope they like found the redemption that they found. It's like, you know, Zack Snyder getting to remake Justice League for like what he actually, his real vision. So it's like, I know what you're talking about with the team, like the director, and I hope that he finally gives himself that much deserved pat on the back.
Yeah, they I mean, it's that saying, right? An artist's work is never done. So
Right.
it's like you'll always look, probably look back and be like, oh, we wish we did it this way. Maybe, just some of the processes, the development, like the boring stuff, wasn't very efficient or what have you. I guess 12's development is well documented, be troublesome from back then. But yeah, I think, they were just really, really nice people. And they were always super grateful for all the work or any work we did for the games. Like, regardless of the fact that it's our job and we have to. But you know what I mean? They were just so happy. And then, like, what was really unusual is that sometimes, especially once a game comes out, because especially in Square, because they have so many games to come out. As soon as one's out, most of the time you have to move on to something else just because, that's your job and there's so many stuff coming out. But the team was very much, usually when you want something to, like, let's say like an asset to help promote something on the game, whether I used to ask some of the artists for some unique artwork just to use on social media, say thank you for the fans and all that kind of stuff. But every now and then we would just get an email from the team, from the 12 team, and they'd be like, thank you for all your work, if you want to use, they would give us like a new bit of some of the assets, some of the art assets you would see on the Final Fantasy Twitter or the Facebook page or Instagram. They would just send it and be like, be very humble and be like, thank you for your work. Did something. We're like, this is really cool. Like, oh my God, this is amazing artwork. And it's like, yeah, and they were always so helpful. So yeah, they were very lovely people. That's basically what I wanted to say in a very roundabout way.
And kind of following up on that, actually. So obviously you're on the team for a lot of these releases, like Danny mentioned. So I guess my question is, like, when you're promoting these games and stuff, do you really get to experience, like, do you play through them? Like, do you get to really experience them? And if you do, which one was your favorite? Like, which game that you were part of the team was your most enjoyable, like, gaming experience?
To play, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It varies. It really varies because as a community manager, and you find this in other companies as well, that in an ideal world, you will see the game throughout its entire development process because, in order for you to talk about it, you need to know everything there is about it. So most of the time, you will already know all the story or the bits and bobs, because you're going to have to like capture content either for
true,
for whatever use, right? So you'll see it in stages. So a lot of the time, by the time the game comes out, you've already played it like 3 or 4 times by the time the final version is out. And sometimes, these are long ass games, so you don't always have the time as well in your free time just to be able to play through again. And sometimes you don't want to, or you have to play something else or what have you. And it's like, but for me, I always tried to play every game that I worked on from beginning to end. Again, because it's so long, that kind of stopped after a while. But I did make an effort to play as much as I could. Final Fantasy 15, actually, I played when it came out at launch from beginning to end, and that was actually the first time I had finished it from beginning to end. I've seen it, stage it, and in pieces, but that was the first time. That was I loved it, despite spending years looking at it and knowing everything about it. I still really, really loved it. In fact, actually, before Type 0 came out, because obviously it came out with Episode of Duskai, before it came out, like every company kind of has what they do is basically like kickoff meetings for their products, right? Where you get all your marketing leads, all your different sales teams everybody's going to work on it, right? And you get them all into a room and you brief them on the game. Like, this is the next project. This is what it's about. So you can figure out what you're going to do in your whatever your discipline is, right? And for Final Fantasy 15, the team were so hands-on that for that kick, I think this might have been the first at the time anyway. I was still relatively green in the company, but that like the Hajime Tabata came over for it to talk to all the teams and to basically tell everyone about the game, which apparently at the time was really unusual, and I think it still might even be unusual because it's the game for the game director to take time out of dev to go halfway across the world to spend a week, when things are really getting busy. It's a big ask, right? Mm-hmm. But he was like, nope, I get it. I basically need to convince these people this game is going to be great, so they'll put all the work into it, as we kind of talked about before. And as part of that, remember let's put it this way, I've known the entire story of Final Fantasy 15 long before it came out. So when I was playing it, even though it's the first time I played it from the internet, I already knew what was going to happen and everything, but I still loved it. But to answer your question more directly, the game, and it's also one in my top 10 of all time, my favorite game that I played after work on it was Nier Automata. And that game is incredible. I've got nothing, like I said, it's in my top 10 of all time. And that was a bit of an unusual game to work on because the team were very, very secretive about the story. They told us just enough for us to know what we needed to know, but so many of the things that were in that story, I don't know if you guys have played it.
Yeah,
I bought it. I bought it, and it's next time I play it through.
Okay, in that case, yes, you should do that for sure. And I won't say anything further, but the way the story goes is like, they basically, the team just didn't want any leaks. They didn't want any leaks. Yeah. So the easiest way to mitigate leaks is just don't tell anyone. Simple as that. So I'd seen the game in certain stages. Obviously, like as any game, you do preview stages where you get press and whatnot and influencers and content creators to talk about the game. But when I played it, when it came out, I had no idea on what actually had the story, especially the latter half. Like the beginning, the first third or so, I knew pretty well, I think. But so when I went into that, not only is it a fantastic game in its own right, regardless of the story, but that was like one of the few games I worked on at Square where I went in with absolutely no idea what was going to happen. And
it's a fantastic experience, and it's also any Xbox player watching it right now. It's on Game Pass, so
no excuse.
Download it. Yeah, no excuse. You gotta play it. It's so good.
Did you do the multiple playthroughs for the multiple endings?
Yeah. You have to. You really have to.
You mentioned So you mentioned that's top 10. Like as someone who is literally a part of the culture, and like you said, you see these games go through development. Obviously, I'm gonna assume that you have a love of gaming from your childhood, everything like that. If you're a millennial, it's of course. So you kind of mentioned Nier Automata is top 10. Thank you, by the way, for solving that crisis that I've had with a couple people on the pronunciation of it, because that's been a debate raging. So because I still have like a buddy who calls it Nier Automata, and I'm just like, ugh. But so you mentioned that's top 10. I would love to know some from your childhood, your adult life, professional career, some of your favorite games of all time.
Ooh, okay. So top 5 is quite easy, I think. So number 1 is Final Fantasy VII.
Yes.
Do I do this in order? Anyway, okay, whatever. Order it.
doesn't have to be in order.
So Final Fantasy VII, Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, Persona 4, Rock Band 3.
Yay!
Oh god, it's so good. Right. And then Nier Automata, Panzer Dragoon Saga, God, this is the thing. Like whenever I think on the spot, I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's
what
when you
actually are
get
they? Yeah,
it's like for me, top three got it easy, get done,
yeah,
and then like five, I can get you a top five, and then after that, it's like okay, now I feel like everything I say is like solidified, and just like
Exactly. Yeah,
I
it's
need
on the
more time
record.
to think
I, I,
about it. It's
I'm
just-
chiseling it in stone as you say it. There's no going back now.
I feel like if I can do a top 10 easy if I don't have to put them in order.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
But if it's ordered, it's like then you really got to think like, oh, we'll do it because like
yeah. It's just better than that one.
I love
Yeah.
Dragons. I love Dragon's Dogma. Dragon's Dogma is always in the top 10, but where it lies in the top 10 might change from like
Just don't
year to
know.
year. It's sometimes I
Yeah.
like something else. Have you ever played the first? Did you play the first Nier?
Yes,
The
Yes, I
first
did.
Nier I thought was amazing. The story, and like, you, I'm not gonna
Oh, man,
spoil it
it's-
or anything, but as you play, the more you play it, the more you're just like, am I doing the right thing here?
yeah. It is so good. It is so good.
Mhm.
I mean, actually, let me take a step back. Everything except the gameplay is so good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
okay.
the gameplay
With the first
is
year.
the gameplay is average if you're being generous.
But then they fixed that with Automata, which
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. Like if you plug away at the original Nier, for the story, for the music, for the characters, for the voice acting, then it's like it is it is an exceptional experience. But
Mm.
unfortunately, the gameplay is what you do the most. So
Yeah.
luckily, there's a remake coming though, so that's fine.
Oh,
Sorted.
yeah, you could either wait for the remake or I suggest to people who don't like to just drudge through gameplay that they're not going to enjoy, just watch a let's play of somebody
True.
drudging through it themselves. Somebody who does like a speed run or something. You still kind of get, kind of like a movie length feature of a really good game.
Yeah, actually, there's an interesting story with the Nier games. The Yoko Taro, the director and creator, I suppose you call him. He we used to joke for the lead up to Nier Automata, because the original Nier came out very, very closely to Final Fantasy 13, and Nier Automata came out very, very close to Final Fantasy 15. So he always used to joke like, "I'm cursed." The Final Fantasy games, they're always
Overshadowed.
there's always a better game in front of mine, is what he always used to say. And it's like, mate, your game is great. And it's like, no, how can I compete? Look at this. And you'd point to pictures like Noctis that we used to have like in the office and stuff, like, look how pretty he is.
Look how pretty.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, look how good this game is. And like, mate, your game is good too. And he was like, oh, thank you. I could never tell with Yoko when he was like, just he's always half joking but also half serious, and it's like lovely man though, lovely guy.
Yeah.
So,
Automata was fantastic and got so much praise. It turns
yeah.
out. Yeah.
I mean, I have buddies who legit have, a whole room full of like, the action figures.
Oh god, I got my shelf up here if you could see some of it.
Yeah, and and posters and books and all that stuff. So I have to ask, because one day I'll find someone who enjoys classic PS1 RPGs. Have you ever played the Suikoden series?
I was going to say number 2 is actually on my top 10.
Oh man! All right, we're best friends now.
Well,
That's one of
Do
my
we
favorite
become
games.
best friends?
Suikoden 2. We actually, one day we went to, I was like 7 or 8, and we were in like Toys R Us in Hawaii, and I happened to see it, and the cover art just looks so cool because you see all the people, and on the back it's like get 108 people. It's like, dude, you can have 108 people in your party here. It's just like awesome, and we bought it and played it and fell in love with it, and then we got Suikoden like the original, and like to this day, like I gotta say top 3: Final Fantasy VII, Suikoden 2, and Breath of Fire 3. If you've ever played the Breath of Fire series.
Yep, I have indeed. Yep.
Love
3 is my favorite in the series in Breath of Fire.
Yep, best friend status.
Best friend status.
And we fangirled over anime before recording, so there should be a chemistry bar like in Sims or something.
Yeah, we should be doing
I
like
have on the
Speaking
Twitch stream, I have
gibberish.
HP and empathy. That's 'cause I should put a limit breaker bar. You guys' limit breakers all the way up.
It's funny because like a lot of like in my like top 10 games, like Final Fantasy, I lump as like probably one category because my top 10 would be filled with a lot of Final Fantasy.
Final Fantasy, right?
like
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
Final Fantasy VII / Final Fantasy would be like number one. But then like, you know, I love games like Resident Evil 4 has to be like one of the best games of all time. It's so corny, but it's so good. And then, you know, you have like Gears of War is great. Dragon's Dogma, just, you know, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Like there's just so many like games that aren't.
One.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because I play Call of Duty Warzone, and one of the tracks on Call of Duty Warzone is I Ran by, was it the Eagles or something? And or a flock of seagulls or something. And whenever that comes on, it just reminds me of like middle school playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City, knowing that I wasn't allowed to play it.
I mean, if we just want to appreciate the greatest quality games of all time, you can't even say that list without mentioning the legendary Katamari Damacy.
Yes, that's such a nonsensical game.
Dude,
That's what makes it so good.
I know.
It's just like I remember one time I was like grounded and I was supposed to like be doing chores and I just like had it for free or something, like the demo disc. And next thing I was like, well, how can I procrastinate so I don't have to do what I'm supposed to? And like 3 hours later, I'm on the same level, just picking up stuff in a ball. And I'd always troll people to be like,
kind of clearing up in a way.
Yeah, exactly. But I troll my friends like, dude, you guys have to, it's a masterpiece. It's like the greatest. And then they play it. There's like, dude, I'm just rolling around in a ball. It's like, exactly.
That's right.
You know, a game I would give like a whole lot of money to play again is Time Splitters 3 or 2. I can't remember. Do you remember Time Splitters?
Yeah,
3 was the good one, right?
3 was Future Perfect with the time. They all got time travel. I'm gonna say like
no, but that was the one for PS2, right? Time Splitters 3.
Yeah, they both were Time Splitters. No way, all 3 of them were.
Were they?
I think Time Splitters 1 was like a close to launch title, I think.
That game, I've had so many. Oh, and Turok. Turok was another one. All these games are just so good. Me and my friends used to get together on playing N64. One of us would be a raptor with a crossbow, and the other ones would be humans, and we would play Hunt the Raptor.
Oh yeah, as long as no one is the bloody monkey in Time Splitters.
Oh yeah.
Oh jeez. Allow that guy, just like that person, like.
I think it's great that Rock Band 3 was in your top.
That's great.
Me and my family would actually play it, and it was great just to have, just to see mom. My mom would sing "Bulls on Parade."
Amazing.
Which was great. Dad was on bass, and my brother Andrew was on drums. I played the guitar, and we played it so much that we actually invested in putting a smoke machine in our living room with lights.
Way, so good.
It was so fun, man.
You used to upload videos. Yeah, you used to upload those videos to like Facebook and stuff back in the day, man.
Just playing Bulls on Parade. I've played it so much that I don't even need to look at the screen. I'm just like going all over.
If you knew Danny's family, you'd appreciate even more just how charismatic their family is, and just like how fun, like how like many million, like thousands of people probably would pay to like be in an arena to watch them play.
It was great, man. And then of course you said number 1, Final Fantasy VII. I 100% on board with you on that one. Final Fantasy VII is man. Oh my God, there's a poster back there. So when they announced Final Fantasy VII Remake, like it was, I bring this up on the show a lot. I promise I won't share the video again. I don't know. Unless Dan wants to be a meme
so bad.
Yeah. It's gonna be a meme if I just share it on every podcast. But yeah, no, man. I did a reaction of it, or at least my wife picked up the phone and just filmed me. I didn't know she was going to film me. I was just so excited that they announced Final Fantasy VII Remake. I called my mom. Like I just called her, and I called everybody on my phone's list that I could, and it was just it was just one of the moments in Final Fantasy in my life in Square Enix history, and yeah, and it is just this monumentous moment. And I was, you were on the team during this time. This is 2015, E3 2015, and it was. I mean, there were reaction videos blowing up. I don't think there was anybody like in the fandom. I can't imagine anybody in the fandom thinking like, any negative thoughts. This was a completely positive event. And yeah, I mean, as I said, I was hyped for it. I know you now learning that Final Fantasy VII is your favorite game. I can imagine that you were also just extremely excited. How long before the announcement did you know this was in the works? And then also, just like your experience during this time.
Yeah, let me think. It's a while ago. I couldn't tell you exact timelines. If I'm going to be honest, I don't really remember that much detail. But what I do remember is it might have been my first E3, maybe my second. 2015. No, it would have been my first. It would have been my first time. And actually, it's yeah. And the thing is, actually, we look back in hindsight now, that was the last PlayStation press conference at E3 as well. Since afterwards they started doing, they pulled out and then they do the state of play stuff now. So yeah, and of course, with COVID, this last year, it's all different. But so yeah, it's what a one to be a part of, right? Because not only do we have VII Remake, but it's like everybody's wet dream with Shenmue 3 and and Last Guardian, among everything else that they showed. But in terms of now, the thing is, this was obviously a very, very closely guarded secret. And the VII Remake announcement, I should say, was a very closely guarded secret. I knew it was happening, but when it was revealed at the press conference was the first time I saw it. I hadn't seen nothing of it. I only knew it existed. And even then, I'm not even sure if I was supposed to know. So, because it was that thing, right? It was like, it had to be a secret. If it got out, then, it would ruin the whole surprise, the whole kind of announce. But it was, because that was also the year, that's right, because that was also the year Square Enix did their first, or at least first in a very long time,
a follow-up conference.
Their own press conference, right? In which case there was so much else to be announced. So I remember being in a meeting where they were talking about that, obviously because we had to know about the press conference ahead of time and announce plans and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, what a crazy time, because that was I mean, let's just remember now, that was also the first time gameplay for Kingdom Hearts 3 was shown.
Oh my god!
So you know what I mean? It wasn't just, there was like so much more. Nier Automata was announced, a game that no one ever thought would ever exist. World of Final Fantasy was announced. Star Ocean was announced.
That was all in the same year, 2015.
Yeah, and we had Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. Square Enix had Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. And Tokyo RPG Factory was just announced with the time Project Setsuna. And a bunch of other stuff, continuing stuff for Hitman. So it was like there was so much going on. It was like,
they needed to have their follow-up conference. That's I remember leading up to it when they announced that they were going to be doing their own press conference. I was like, oh my god. I even I had like a little YouTube channel going on beforehand, and I created this video of like Final Fantasy VII Remake ? All over, and I was just like, guys, listen, we got all of this stuff kind of leading up to it, and then the fact that they're doing their own press conference makes me have this strong feeling that we're going to see finally a Final Fantasy VII Remake. And it was funny because that's what I was calling it before they even called it Final Fantasy VII Remake. I was calling it Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I was just talking about it, and then the surprise was at PlayStation. And I was completely taken off guard because I was expecting it, if it was at all going to be at the Square Enix press conference. And then, man, oh god, when that moment happened and the audience just erupted, like it was probably, I would say it's probably the biggest pop at E3. I'm not sure. It could be the biggest pop at E3.
Yeah, you know
and
what?
you were in the auditorium for that.
I was very, very lucky to be there, yeah. And I tell you that experience will be one I take to my grave. I don't think I will ever experience anything like it. Like, I was super hyped. You know what I mean? It's like, this is exactly what I've been waiting for and I wanted for years. And even in our room, even I was feeling like, God, guys, chill out. It was that kind of, it was so much that I was like, okay, this is a bit much even for me. And I'm like, and I want to be the one of the guys like screaming. And I'll tell you what, it was, because I'm not sure if it really comes across in the stream, but it was quite funny because Square Enix announced World of Final Fantasy before it.
Yeah,
So
right before.
because there was I felt really bad because obviously people had got like an inkling when they told Final Fantasy, like, is it Final Fantasy VII Remake? That's all anybody wanted to know about, not what anybody wanted to hear. So it was like, it's a new Final Fantasy game. And it was like, is it? And then it's like, not only is it not that, but it's like this chibi art style, which I think looks dope. But
yeah, it's like these little cutesy.
Yeah, it looks really cool. I think World of Final Fantasy incredible style. But it's like, when you see that and then it's not what you wanted, everyone's like, oh man.
Man, they bamboozled us a bunch of times. And then with the I think it was earlier that year. I think it was earlier that year when they announced Final Fantasy VII coming to PS4.
Oh yeah.
It was just the classic version coming over, or the Steam version.
Would actually be really great though is if they announce like a game where they're like, it's a new Final Fantasy where it's like grim and bloody. It's like rated M for content.
16, baby.
Yeah, and it's like, but it's all chibi art.
But it's all chibi.
It's like the darkest, most melodramatic game ever, but it's chibi animation.
So Dan, the fan reaction to that, man. How would then you had to go? I guess you had to go back to work and
I had to go to work.
Yeah, you had to go to work, man. You had to go to work and respond to this. Yeah. This
is the thing, right? Because on the one hand, like the reaction was just so crazy. Like I talked about like how everyone's kind of like after World of Final Fantasy, it's like, that's not fair. This is cool. Get hyped for this. So
yeah.
But then what I didn't take, like after that, because obviously the remake announced was immediately after. So if you remember, they had the live stream graphic in the background, and people would. I'll tell you. This might not have come across from the stream, but because where I was sat like in the store, not the stores, in the circle seats, I guess, of the auditorium. So I could see down into the stalls, and I could visibly see people, like when the light stream came up, some people like, you could hear people like murmuring, like, the fuck is this? Oh, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear. Sorry,
fine.
What?
No,
okay,
it's fine.
It's like, what the hell is this? And you're like, okay, whatever. And then this trailer starts. Obviously, big dramatic music, and everyone's just like, "What are we watching?" And then, slowly but surely, as more recognizable things come in, you've got like, you see Midgard, like, is this Midgard? No, this isn't Midgard, I remember. But then you see a little bit more, and when you're talking, and you see people. Funnily enough, it starts from the front and goes back, and people like actually, literally getting out of their seats, like, nah, and then a bit more like. No way. Nah. This was all happy. It was like a Mexican wave. As long as the trailer went on, more and more people were standing up and cheering. They're like, oh, it is. And they're like, no, shut up, sit back down. It's not that. And then, of course, when you see Barrett's arm, everyone's like, and then obviously then Cloud comes in, you see the Buster Sword, and everyone's on the floor, and it was like the whole thing was going to cave in. And then, you see the logo, and it says remake, and then absolutely pandemonium, and it was so loud, like, and you just see, yeah, just seeing everybody's like, nah, yes, oh please, literally like that, and I could see it happening right in front of me. It was absolutely nuts. But the thing is that the timing was obviously before Final Fantasy 15 had come out. And obviously we announced World of Final Fantasy. So really, sometimes, Square Enix is not the only company to do this, like announce games early. But sometimes and then whenever you announce a game, sometimes you just, what we say, like you go dark and you just don't respond, and you just let, especially when it's something positive, you just let the community just kind of just absorb the hype and just go with it, run with it. You don't necessarily have to do anything, especially when you've got nothing to talk about, nothing to show, right? Because all you can really say is, yes, it exists now. And you can, you know what I mean? Which is good enough anyway. So sometimes you can lean into that and join in on the hype. But it was a bit of a difficult situation, not difficult, maybe challenging situation for me, because obviously, Final Fantasy 15 was still our number one priority, and then obviously World of Final Fantasy as well. And it just wouldn't. It makes absolutely no business sense for a company to put all their energy into massive, like multiple big titles that are not coming out at the same time, right? You want to focus on what's coming first. And again, like Kingdom Hearts was also revealed, right? Yeah. So with Sora's new outfit, the gameplay, in the unfortunately untitled Kingdom of Corona from Tangled. Oh, God, yeah, so it's like, oh, Tangled, gameplay for Kingdom Hearts. So it's like, so we've got all these. So naturally, the strategy, like any company, you focus on what's first and then you move there. And that's why even when Kingdom Hearts 3 was coming out and I had left the company, there was still no real anything about Final Fantasy Remake, because why would you divert attention away from your current really, really big and really exciting product, right? Your game. So I didn't really have that much to do on 7 Remake. There were occasionally a couple of times where we had a few updates, screenshots here and there, just a little bit of information. But there was, my focus was mostly on Final Fantasy 15 and a little bit on Kingdom Hearts 3. So I didn't really do much on 7.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Man, and I guess in a weird kind of way, I mean, besides 7 Remake kind of just taking over E3, like the buzz afterwards was just basically Remake, and
best like E3 ever.
You kind of don't think about it on this end of the things, on this side of the spectrum, but I guess World of Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts 3, all of these huge announcements were in a way a little overshadowed, but it also brought attention to them in a cool way too. So like if you're looking up Final Fantasy VII Remake E3, it's probably going to be attached with these like, oh hey look, there's this cutesy style Final Fantasy game coming out. There's, oh my god, Kingdom Hearts 3 is obviously, that was such an incredible year. It was just an overload of the senses, and I loved it, man. I loved it was like Christmas.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever. I can't see it ever happening again. It's kind of like, do you remember seeing the videos of when Nintendo announced Twilight Princess, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, and the crowd going nuts, and Miyamoto coming out with the Hylian Shield, massive sword. It's it's those kind of things, those kind of events and those reactions. Same with 7 Remake, they are once in a lifetime things.
Yeah,
like
that's why E3 needs to stay around, man. I love E3.
I think the only thing that would like elicit that type of response again is like the announcement of Half-Life 3. I think that's
any Valve 3. They can just have a 3 event in Portal 3, Half-Life 3, and just I would say Left 4 Dead 3, but I guess they kind of have their spiritual sequel with Back 4 Blood, but
or an HD PS4 remake of Parappa the Rapper.
Yep.
Do they already have?
There's the biggest pop at E3. Parappa the Rapper is back.
Yeah, it just dwarfs Final Fantasy VII Remake.
To touch on what you said earlier about like trailers, like not being able to put a trailer out if you don't really have much to show. If I remember correctly, the Elder Scrolls 6 like announcement trailer, I think was just like a camera panning on some mountains, and then it said Elder Scrolls 6, and I think that's all I needed to get hyped for that.
Yeah.
Morgan
I mean,
Sapphire Raven says Final Fantasy VI Remake would do it for me, and honestly,
Dude,
oh my god,
yes.
I think that's the one out of all of the games. Actually, I think that is the one that deserves it and needs it the most.
it really does.
I think
really,
objectively, Final Fantasy VI is probably like all in all, objectively like the best Final Fantasy, just in terms of like how it progressed, like the series, and just like the whole concept of like Kefka winning, like the floating island, destroying the world and stuff.
Game
like
in remake graphics.
Yeah, and then and so much of that went into 7, which is, I mean, in my opinion, my favorite Final Fantasy. But like 6 is just like so amazing, and like you're saying, Danny, like could you imagine like that setting? Could you imagine the scene where Kefka destroys the world, like moving the statues, in a remake, like?
There's so many amazing moments. There's so many like it's such great story.
The opera house would be amazing.
Oh yeah. Oh god. 100%. And then like I would say that you could take the style, and this is really what I expected them to do with 7. You take remakes, or I'm sorry, you take the story, the original story, and then like when you're doing it with 6, I get what they achieved with 7 remake. And they wanted to kind of open it up, but I think with 6 they really should kind of just retell the story, just faithfully retell the story. You can adjust some of the characters, like there are some weak, in a way there's some kind of weak characters in there, and you can give them more of a prominent backstory and stuff like that, but other than that, like just retell that story.
Yeah, I agree. Because the thing is with 6 is that it's one of its greatest assets is also its greatest weakness, or 2 actually, I'd say. The huge cast, with the idea of it being designed that there is no singular protagonist and that all protagonists of they're overarching in their own story, but what you find in reality is that kind of dilutes it rather than makes it something compelling that you can latch onto and follow all the way through. And same with Kefka. He's a classic. What's the term?
Just
like a villain of. I forget what the actual term is, but he's a villain who, if you actually look at him, he's pretty shallow, and there's really not much to him. But he gives so much urgency and agency. He's an instrument of chaos. He's like the Joker to Batman.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Joker. Yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, he even looks at it. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, but you know what I mean. So it's like, while what he does is great narratively, it's like who he is not. And I played 6 long after. Like, it was one of the last of the mainline games I played. I played it after I played 13. After 13 came out, because 6 actually never came out on the SNES in Europe. Came out on the PS1, but with limited release.
Right.
So it's hard to, less easy to get hold of, I suppose. So I played it after all the other games, and while I still appreciate what it is and what it does, and it's still, don't get me wrong, I love it. It's still fantastic. Probably my 6th favorite. That's not a coincidence. That is a coincidence. Sorry. It does struggle with pacing as well, and what it feels like is very much set piece followed by set piece followed by set piece. It's like the Opera House, when I played it, was like, it was a great moment, but the lead up to it is like, I don't really understand why I'm here. And the writing, because of the time, is like, there's improvement in writing and all that kind of stuff. And as Dan, as you mentioned, the character backstories aren't necessarily fully fleshed out in there. So I think, remaking it and keeping as much of it as possible, to the source material, unlike 7 Remake, which is like doing its own thing. I think, it's the right choice for that game.
So you don't want a Kefka redemption arc in the remake?
Hey.
I mean,
Some
Kefka
men just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah, it's kind of the same. Wow, here's more Joker Kafka equivalencies. Like with Joker, you never really know what like drove him to where he is. Like the most common theory is like he was a soldier who got like traumatized or something. But like with Kafka, it's kind of the same concept where he was basically what Terra was, where he was like a Magitech knight, and the the process like just drove him absolutely crazy.
They can explore that a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would love to see more of that. Like, it'd be really cool if they did like a Crisis Core kind of concept for like 6, where they kind of go into like the war and Kefka and all that stuff. That'd be awesome. I'm also like really
totally
partial
do a multimedia approach.
I'm also very partial to Kefka because we have the same birthday, so I am.
Well, that's the thing when we compare him to the Joker, but the Joker is only half interesting, right? The thing that really makes him the Joker is a duality with Batman, and likewise, Batman is interesting because of the Joker. Whereas in 6, there's no Batman.
That's a good point.
6, right? Because the cast is so big. There's no singular. I mean, they kind of want it to be Terra for a bit, but she's not got enough time really to delve into that.
Well, and also,
I still think about your joke, man. I still think about it. Like somebody said, God. "Oh, I know Terra as Tina," and
oh, me?
No, Reed. Was it Reed or was it you that said?
I played the original 6, and her name is Tina, not Terra. In the one I played.
And they said when the crown's put on her head, Reed said,
"Oh yeah, that was me."
Would you call that a Tina Turner?
Oh yeah. So yeah.
Oh man, no, I'm sorry I repeated it.
Don't be. One of these days, my career is gonna launch. All right, off one of these jokes. Come on, like if that isn't the mastery of wordplay, I don't know what is.
You're getting booed off the stage by chat.
Yeah, right. Dan's gonna ask me for a script for a game here one of these days. Now, any day now, he's gonna be like, hey, just follow up on that Tina Turner joke.
Yeah, oh man, that's great. So Final Fantasy VII Remake was announced, and you had this incredible hype around it, and that I'm sure was you. Like you said, you're gonna take that moment to the grave with you, and you were at E3. Have you had any other like memories or experiences that you would like to share during your time at E3 or at Square Enix, or even with WB Games, which you're working at now?
You mean generally, or like to do with the events, or?
Yeah, I mean like just in your career.
Okay. God, there's so many. It's I've been very, very fortunate. I mean there's just so many. I'll always be thankful for my time at Square Enix, and I loved it all. And I got from the first time from when I worked, Final Fantasy Type 0 HD, is with my first Final Fantasy title that I worked on. I remember completing that game and seeing my name in the credits and calling my mum, and she's giving me a very kind of like, oh, is that a good thing then, having your name in there? And like, yes, mum, yes, this means a lot to me. And like, oh, good for you. Like, kind of conversation, like, okay, that's nice.
Oh man,
and and like obviously working on multiple main lines, with one new main line with Final Fantasy 15 and everything to do with that. It uncovered Final Fantasy 15. I got to meet Hironobu Sakaguchi and Yoshitaka Amano, and I still, one of my life regrets is not getting an autograph or a selfie with him, so I totally messed up there. But I still got to do it. I still, I know. I still got to meet them, and again, lovely people. I thought they would be a bit like, what's going on? Who are you? But they were just, very, very nice. I thought Yoshitaka Amano, for some reason, I particularly thought he might have been a bit stuffy, but no, he was just a regular nice man.
Awesome.
Hironobu Sakaguchi was was a lot more kind of like had a little bit more of a party atmosphere kind of going around about him. He was just like, yeah, well, he always does. Like, I know he's lives in Hawaii right now. He's always like doing this and all his photos, just jumping in, just like
he's hanging loose, man.
Yeah, he's like, all right,
hit you with them shaka lasers.
Yeah, So yeah, that was obviously great. Meeting lots of my heroes at Square was fantastic. I got to meet Tetsuya Nomura. I got to meet a lot of the people who worked on Final Fantasy VII. I got to meet so many people. So lucky. And yeah, it's just I'm trying to think of. This is the thing when I get put on the spot. I'm like, I got to think of maybe putting out maybe one or two kind of really special moments. Actually,
those are some really incredible moments too.
I'll tell you. Actually, what I will do, which because of the format we're in on the live stream, I'll show you. Let me just give a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you one thing. I'll show you one thing. There's not many people will know or see. Oh. So, when I first joined Square, it was on the launch week actually of Theaterism Final Fantasy Curtain Call. So most of the team were like really busy with the launch, and I was just, and it was also at a time when the team we were moving office, so everything was like everyone was packing up stuff. So I'm like, don't really know what I'm supposed to do yet, especially because it's like my first community manager role. So I was just like, okay, I'll just, but I just made myself busy and whatnot. And I was really, really lucky and fortunate enough to go to Tokyo Game Show that year. Which was the next week, which was my second week on the job. I was sent to TGS, and I was like, "This is nuts," but really, really cool. And this is also when we had like some meetings with, because this is also when Episode Dust Sky was being announced. So we had some meetings and talking to this is where I first met the Final Fantasy 15 dev team, and they were running through a bunch of stuff, and we went to with some of the publicity team and a man called Yusuke Naora, who is one of the lead art directors on not only Final Fantasy, he's basically worked on all your favorite games. He worked on Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 6 through 10, and a bunch of other stuff. And so he's done a lot of stuff, and he's again really lovely man. There's a theme going with the developers. And so we all went out drinking one night, and the two women on the publicity team who would basically be our direct contacts with the studios in Square-Enix, because obviously there's a language barrier, so we have to go through certain people because they translate basically all our emails and we're on calls, what we're saying, and all that kind of stuff. And they asked me, because I was obviously new and they had no idea who I was and whatnot. They would say, "Oh, why did you join Square-Enix?" Now, basically, I told them how basically like my history with the franchise, with the Final Fantasy franchise in particular, but Square-Enix in general. So I told them how Final Fantasy VII really changed my life, and it changed how I saw video games as a medium, and but basically, I just fanboyed over Final Fantasy games. And Yusuke Naora, who was with us, was just, he was like kind of on my left, and the women were on my right, and he was just quietly listening. I don't, because I was obviously speaking English. I'm not sure how much he understood what I was saying, but they were translating bits of what I was saying, and he was there just drinking away. Which in Japan is really weird because they have like small tumbler glasses. When you drink shots, you don't just drink shots. They pour shots into glasses of water and drink that. And I'm like, this is weird. Why not just do the shot? Anyway, so they're in this regular bar. We're in this regular bar. Sorry, a bar that they regularly go to. Apparently, at the time, I don't think it exists anymore, sadly. But apparently, a lot of like famous voice actors and actors go there. No one came in when we were there, so I didn't get to meet anyone famous, sadly. But you know what? If you know what Japanese bars like, they're very small. They're like only a couple of seats. They're not necessarily exclusive. Anyone can go in, but they're not like our pubs or bars in the West where they're like where you get like hundreds of people in. Mm-hmm. So I see him reach over. He gets the bartender over. And he says something to him, obviously in Japanese. I have no idea what he was saying at the time. And the bartender says, "Give him a thumbs up." And he comes up and gives him just piece of paper. And then he just starts doodling, and I was still in the middle, like still this in the corner of my eye, but I was still just gushing about Final Fantasy because at the time I was a little bit tipsy, and right now I'm sober. But when I'm tipsy, just imagine me talking, but talking twice as fast and twice as long. So, so I was going off. I was telling all these things on how much I loved the game, and then, I tapped me on the shoulder and he goes, "I want you to have this," and let me show you. It's a one of a kind sketch of. Hang on, let me get the reflection. There you go. Of Cloud.
That was awesome.
Wow.
From the art director of basically all my favorite games.
Wow.
I made a big screen.
And he was just like, thank you for being a fan, and thank you for wanting to join the company and helping us out. And so that's, and as a side note, there's a fun fact: he has a hobby as well as writing people's names in kanji. So he also I think this might be the place. This might be the bar that we went to.
Hold on,
nice.
I'm gonna full screen.
And
there we go.
and then he wrote my name for me as well on the the coasters.
And then you guys proceeded to get hammered.
Oh yeah, we did karaoke, and we had to go. Obviously, we had meetings early meetings next day, and I was like, I am not feeling great. Actually, that was it. And then because that was it. Because at the tea, another funny story. Because in a meeting, like, it was a dark room because they had projection screen and they were showing us stuff on Final Fantasy 15. Because it was a Final Fantasy 15 team and they were going through stuff. And I was just like, I'm going to fall asleep. This is all really interesting. I love being here. But I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't normally get hangovers. But I was just like, I don't feel like I've slept in 2 days. Because I was probably a bit jet lagged still. And I didn't think about what I was wearing. So I just put through on a T-shirt. And at the time, it was a T-shirt. It was like a QWERTY, mashup T-shirt. It was Final Fantasy. It was the Buster Sword in the Master Sword kind of, what do you call them? The thing where you stab in the stone, that you stab in the ground. So it was like a Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy VII mashup. And nice. I didn't think about what I was wearing, so I just put it on, and we went to our meeting. And halfway through this meeting, we're having a break. I go off to grab a glass of water, and I just noticed a bunch of people were just kind of like crowding around me and just looking at me. And at first I was just like, oh, it's just because I'm the new guy. I'm from the UK team or from the European team, so they don't see us often. So it was like, whatever. And and Japanese people are very reserved anyway. So, but then it just clocked. Then I clocked. I was like, they were pointing at me. So I was like, why are they pointing at me? And then it clocked. I was like, oh no, they're pointing at my T-shirt. Because I was wearing a Final Fantasy VII T-shirt to a Final Fantasy 15 meeting. And I was just like, uh-oh, did I just do a really, really big taboo? Am I going to get in trouble for this?
This is what you're going to be known for this.
Yeah. And then, and I was like, oh no, this is not what I need right now. And then one of the staff members then comes out to me, tried his best in broken English, but he basically comes out to me and says, excuse me, like T-shirt. And I was like, oh, thank God. They're pointing at it because they like it. It's okay. And I was like, oh yeah, Final Fantasy VII and Legend of Zelda, and it was like, and he just give me thumbs up, and then everyone else was like just nodding and was like thumbs up.
That's awesome, yeah.
And I was like, dodged the bullet.
again with the kind of referencing back to Liam Mulvey, he had a similar story when he was on the podcast. He talked about it. How he was at this, I guess it was like script reading or something, sitting at this meeting, and he was telling, like, before it started, like really quietly, he was like, oh my God, like I'm freaking out because I love Final Fantasy so much, like you were just kind of nerding out about it. And then and he's like, okay, and then the meeting starts, and he said, and the first thing the person I was talking to does, it says, hey, we have a really big Final Fantasy fan here, and he's just geeking out. And he's just like, it's like, this is what I'm going to be known for.
Yeah. That guy.
That's awesome, man. It's so cool that, like you said, the developers are big fans of their own work, and obviously, video games in general. Zelda obviously is a huge inspiration. So that's awesome. That's a really cool story. Yeah, so we're gonna take a fan question. Anybody have a fan question that you guys
Yes.
would like to ask Dan before we
So,
yeah, Vinny is the he's Inferno in the chat. So if you, I'm sure he's already introduced himself, but if you see it, Inferno, that is Vinny McGovern. So Vinny's taking care of the chat. Go ahead, Vinny.
Morgana Sapphire Raven wants to know what your absolute favorite game is.
That's it's actually Final Fantasy VII original.
Okay.
Original. I do love the remake, but OG Final Fantasy VII is my favorite of all time.
So I'm gonna piggyback off that. What's your favorite party? Like who's the party you like to use the most for 7?
Cloud, Tifa, and Yuffie.
Yuffie, I actually I just played through it again and just beat it before I started 12 Zodiac. But man, I really liked it. I try to mix it up. So as a kid I did Yuffie Red or Tifa Red, I'm sorry. And then I decided to mix it up and did Yuffie Vincent on my last one. I was like, oh, this is fun. But I still didn't grasp like how broken Yuffie was. And then this time I decided I was just gonna go mainline story. I was gonna I'm gonna use Tifa Barrett. I'm just gonna use like the most streamlined party there is. But like doing like the Crash Galnica and stuff like that, I was trying to morph, source farm where you morph all the mobs there and you get sources. And it finally clicked on me that Yuffie's was the only character whose ultimate weapon could use morph and hit for full strength. And then I got Doom of the Living and used it on a boss. I'm like, this is the most broken character in this.
This is
entire
ridiculous.
I told you.
Yeah.
Reed doesn't like to listen to me in chat, but
This is the thing.
Why
right?
I never.
The thing is with 7 though is because of the material system, you really can use whoever you want. But
Yeah,
if you're gonna go full on end game max stats, then realistically every hit you're gonna do is 9,999 damage, right? So you want whatever limit break does the most hits.
Right.
That's gonna be doing the most. So that's why I use those 3. But to be honest, I think the first. Let me think. And also, I think actually they might have been my first party that I used. So I might have just stuck, nostalgia's sake. I do sometimes swap out Yuffie for Sid. But Tifa is always in there because Tifa's my favorite.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's my ship. That's my
That's
ship.
my ship. Oh god, here we go.
That's my ship.
Sid's Highwind, Barrett's
Anger
Max, Yuffie's Doom of the Living, and Omni Slash and Knights of the Round. Those are going to be your highest hitting ones because of how many times you hit, because there's no break damage limit. So, but the thing about Knights of the Round is they actually ignore defense with every hit. So that's why they're better off earlier. But Yuffie and Barrett and everything, if you master like 9 all materias and throw them all on Barrett's missing score, he'll hit as hard as Yuffie does with her Conformer. Because he's scaled off of how much AP you have equipped onto the weapon. Okay, so
like the subtle things that I love about it, like, and because obviously, like, once you get to end game, everyone's gonna hit for 9,999. So it's like from like the level like 30 to like 70 range where you can really appreciate like all the differences between characters, because that's like the period where like a broken character can kind of shine through before they're kind of like like squished down to the level cap, kind of like the damage cap kind of thing. But yeah, I always find it really interesting, like debating like the parties people use.
Yeah,
like,
let's be real. Like most people are going to do whoever Knights around my mime, Knights around my mime, Knights around my mime. That's what everyone's going to do, right? Even though you're going to be in every battle for like 20 hours.
Yo, yeah, well, three times speed helps with that. When in the
it sure
nuance.
does.
Well, you could actually put mime counter like 7 times on Yuffie and have Yuffie use Doom of the Living, and if she gets hit, the next time she gets hit, she's gonna use Doom of the Living 9 times in a row.
Yeah.
So that's usually how I beat Emerald without underwater materia.
Do we have any more questions, Vinny?
Yes, we do. We have one from Zombie Nugs. Who is your favorite Final Fantasy male and female character?
Female character is Tifa,
Hmm.
easily,
Oh, yeah.
without question. She's my favorite character in the whole game anyway. I think she is the heart and soul of that game.
She's the
Well,
rock.
I believe it could be any Final Fantasy.
Oh,
A
any
mixture-
Final. Well,
a
actually,
mixture
to be fair, then it's still Tifa.
Okay, I
Tifa.
figured.
Followed by Yuna, I reckon.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and my favorite character. Ooh, this is a tough one. Okay, then
It doesn't have to be lead. I don't think.
Yeah, just any.
There was no
Uh,
specificity, but yeah, it could probably be any Final Fantasy male character.
Okay, I got it. So protag. Okay, my favorite any character is Zell. I just
Yeah.
love Zell.
hey,
I just love
Zell.
Zell. Yeah, he's
there's
just so
some
much
love
fun.
for Zell, man. Like, yeah.
You know, he's
You
the
know,
best. He is the best
Dan-
boy.
Just,
Dan
just
probably
wants
would have
hot
got
dogs.
my hot dog gift reference in
He
the
would've.
game.
What if we had a hot dog gift or Reed
We
had a
had
hot dog?
giveaway.
There's,
Talk-
we
there's
did a
no way we
secret-
can explain this without context, but we're gonna leave it right there.
We did
No
a secret
context, like-
Santa.
Shrek
we-
was there. It was a
Yeah,
good
we
time.
did,
Shrek
we
was
did
there.
Secret Santa, and so each of us would pick gifts, and everyone else had to guess what character it was for. And
Yeah, there you
so one of my Secret Santa gifts was a hot dog, and no one got it. I was like, it's Cell, because like at the beginning of Final Fantasy VIII, he's just like he's so mad that there's all that hot dogs, and like throughout the game, he peppers in comments like, "Man, I wish I was eating one of those hot dogs like right now." Man just loves his frankfurters.
Nutritious
Finally
and
gets
delicious. They're actually
Right.
probably not very nutritious.
Probably not.
But no, he's always been my favorite ever since like a kid. Now that I think about it, he's just so reliable and
Yeah.
just fun.
Yeah.
But in terms of protag, it would be either Squall or Noctis, for different reasons actually. Noctis, I love. Out of the four bros, actually Prompto is my favorite, but I love Noctis as a protagonist because he is the only protagonist in Final Fantasy history who is not make sure I get this right. So his whole arc, like usually in Final Fantasy, actually, in fact, I think all of the games is in some way the story is about defying fate. Obviously, some games more than others. 7 Remake and 13 in particular, are, all about that. Whereas 15 is the opposite. It's about accepting fate. And I love Noctis because he's a lot more, despite being a prince or a king, he's the most relatable because he's just like many of us in our lives, we're forced into positions we don't want to be in and we don't want to do, or what have you. And it's like, you just want to be just like lead boring regular life and just want to do boring regular things like play video games with your friends, go or fishing. For some reason the Japanese love fishing. But yeah, there's a point when in your life where you have to grow up and you have to, accept responsibility, pay your taxes, get a job, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, that's why I really love Bannon, that he's so stupid. He is really stupid and goofy.
Yeah.
But he's also the kind of guy who hates to show it. And I think a lot of millennials who are into video games can relate to that because video games have not been cool when we were kids. It was never something that you would really brag about. It's different now because of the internet and you can find your own communities and fandoms. But back then, it's like, you kind of hide that. A lot of us, anyway, I imagine I did, hid that part away from yourself. Like this is that guy who fanboys over Assassin's Creed, and and at the same time, just wants to just chill and just say bad jokes. So that's why I love him as a protagonist because he's so much different, I guess.
So what Dan's saying is that if they do a live action Final Fantasy 15 movie, I should play Noctis.
As long as you get the hair.
Fishing, bad jokes.
You're not.
So let me ask you this.
You have
Dan.
the hair for it, Reed. I feel like
Right?
you could do it, man.
This
I
is
feel like
a
you could do it.
this is a follow up. So something you mentioned your top two favorite protagonists. So all right, let's say hypothetically we had a tier list in front of us.
Oh
All right,
god.
there's S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier. Okay, where on that tier, if you're measuring a protagonist, which tier would you put Squall in?
I put him S.
No, okay, well, you gotta
Okay,
you know what,
all right.
Dan? All right,
This
we're
is-
taking
yeah,
Dan's
there
and
you
we're
go.
balancing it out, all right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we did a protagonist tier list, and we put Squall in C tier. Just because there some of the it's not so much Squall's fault. Some of the writing and scripting of his character is kind of like a little groany. I love Final
Yeah.
Fantasy. I love Final Fantasy 8, but like there's one scene in particular I can never get over where you're leaving Timber after like the when Cypher crashes the broadcast and all that gets taken away and stuff, and they think he's dead. And Squall's like thinking about like Cypher being dead and stuff. He's like, someone's like, oh, Cypher was like a nice guy or something. And Squall just like stands up and like does one of those like arm slices to the side. And he's like, I won't be talked about in the past tense. Yeah, thank you. You did it at the exact same time I did. It was like, I won't be talked about in the past tense. I was like, all right, come on, man.
And for that alone, they put him in C, right?
So,
C
all right. So, yeah. So here's what we're going to do. If Dan, out of sheer respect, since he's been fanboying with us all day, his opinion matters. So I am going to invoke
C tier.
a revote on Squall.
Wait, hold on.
And we can move him.
Hold on. My
A
trust in
revote.
him is going to be based off of this. Where do you put Vaughn?
Oh yeah.
Wait, what? How low does it go? Not that he's
Yeah, D tier.
goes down to D. I put him in D.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. That's
Okay, so
yeah,
Squall's
see,
S tier.
We're on the same page.
Squall's
Yeah.
S tier.
The thing is about Vaughn though, it's not that he's a bad character. It's just that he's
along
completely
for the ride.
yeah, he's inconsequential. If
Yeah,
he wasn't
exactly.
there, it wouldn't matter.
The
really.
game wouldn't be any different if he was there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he's like a tauntaun. Like Star Wars.
He's a
Or
tauntaun.
Final Fantasy 12 is so heavily influenced by Star Wars, like
Yeah.
Balthiers, Han Solo, like all these, but like yeah, he's basically just like a tauntaun, or he's like Jar Jar
I wouldn't
Binks.
go that far.
He's
He
Jar
is,
Jar Binks.
he's a New Hope Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, I mean that's how
because,
they. Yeah,
because think about it, because he's one along for the ride, Luke, just like Luke, but is also he's purely there as like a vessel for exposition. You put yourself in him because the world of Evil is already set up. It all has its politics, it all has its law, and you get thrown in there. You're like, what the fuck is going on, right? So he's there to be like the doe-eyed boy, like Luke Skywalker, when he's like, "What's a Jedi?" And he's like, and Van's like, "Who are these guys? Why should I be doing
Right.
this?" So then Balthier is just like, "You're doing this because of this. Hop to it."
I just like to
He's
picture
the Luke
Fran as
Skywalker that
Chewbacca.
Yeah,
So,
The
So-
animal. Yeah.
Are you saying we are Vaughn?
yeah, we're
Yeah,
supposed to be.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
we're D tier. All right. That hurt.
That hurt.
Well, I mean,
Narratively speaking,
would
only
yeah.
narratively speaking.
Yeah, would you put your? I mean, you can't use materia or magic or anything like that. Come on, Vinny.
If I was in final, I
True.
feel like if I was in one of their worlds, I would adapt very quickly.
Vinny, if
I'm
there's
all about. I've been waiting for something
if
like
there's
that
a
to
fi-
happen.
I've
there's
been
a
waiting for this moment.
if there's a turn-based firefighter RPG, you'd be S tier.
To be fair though, Vaughn has a rockin' six-pack, and I don't.
Dude,
So, what about you?
one of my gifts. So for the Secret Santa, one
Does
of
have
my
that
gifts
on.
was going to be a can of spray paint because in the original Final Fantasy 12, his
Oh, yeah,
pack
yeah,
looks
yeah.
like it's like spray
Spray
painted
painted.
on. So it's like I just imagine like people wake up in the morning and they put in their hair gel. Like the first thing he does in the morning, like Donald Trump's spray tan, is he wakes up first thing in the morning and sprays on his six-pack.
So we have another question, which is from Morgana Sapphire Raven, and she wants to know what is your favorite moment in Final Fantasy VII.
That's a good one. 'Cause everybody's varies on this one. Is it?
Yeah,
There's so many good moments in Final Fantasy VII.
this is a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a moment for every like
I
I
think
mean,
for like while Dan's thinking, I'll buy him some time. So my most recent playthrough is I always think about the diamond weapon scene and like how Rufus gets hit, blown up and all that stuff. But
Oh yeah, you're
I
poking
feel
it
like,
in the toe, and it's just like, yeah, I'll fight you.
I feel like every time I see that scene, like that whole series of scenes, I feel like every time I watch it, it's different. Like it's never how I remember it, kind of thing. So having just done it again, like the scene with Sapphire Weapon, man, I like it's I feel like it's a very clear homage to Godzilla, because when he's coming out of the water, it's the same thing where he has like the scales and like his back is slightly protruded through, like, and everything like that. And just that scene is so badass. And then Diamond Weapon just getting blasted after he fires off his volley and stuff, like I watched it, I was like, I swear it as a kid it was like different every time, but Sapphire Weapon getting his head blown off is just, man,
that's a pretty awesome.
Shinra is it's so hard to like label them, because throughout the story, like the barrier around Northern Crater, like they not only does Sister Ray blow a hole, blow off Sapphire Weapon's head, blow a hole through Diamond Weapon and kill him, but in the same blast destroys the barrier around Northern Crater. So you literally are partnering with Shinra.
Yeah.
I mean, you become buddy basically, Reno and Rude. You just every time you fight, it's like siblings. You like scrap a little, and they're just like, we're done for today. Like walk away.
And it's the whole thing with Kate's as well, right? And Reeve, because he's an employee.
Mhm.
I think my favorite would be it's something under the, like, that is a really badass moment, to be fair. I kind of tend to like my favorite moments are like kind of smaller bits, because everyone, like, there's obviously the huge temporal moments, like, obviously what happens to Aerith, falling into the live stream, which I think when you discovering that is actually that is a really big. I won't say. You know what? Yeah, I'll give you a couple. So one of them is when Cloud and Tifa fall into the live stream, because not only do you find out their true history, but it's also, I like the narrative symbolism and the journey of piecing yourself back together, right? Because I think everyone goes through moments in their lives where they like, feel like sometimes giving up, right? Whether it be from extremes, or just from a bad day's work, and you're just like, why do I bother? And it's like going through that with someone and being able to pick yourself up, I think is really powerful. There's the counterbalance that the bit in when you go to Wutai and you're like, when you see Reno and he's like, man, I'm off duty, leave me alone, and you're like, oh, okay. So it's like, just like they're like regular guys, like, so it's like, we don't go after you because it's personal, we just do it because of our jobs, because we have to. But like, I'm on holiday, I don't give a shit, you know what I mean? Like that's like probably one of the most human parts in Final Fantasy VII. And then of course then you team up when to rescue Elena and Yuffie.
And Don Corneo getting, I just love how he like just stomps his hands off the cliff. He Mufasa's him.
Yeah.
He gets Mufasa.
So
and then I was going to say that there's also I just saw in the chat, obviously my namesake is in the game, so that's obviously a big favorite. And again, very special moment between, I guess, father and son.
Mm-hmm.
But I also really like just before you go to the Northern Crater, and the high wind, you get the jetpacks and you go shooting off, and it started Disc 3. When everybody goes off, because this in part, as well as the when you go to attack Sister Ray, when it's in Midgar, when you do the parachute jump, because that's the moment where up until that point there's been quite clear lines on like good and bad. Well, not easy, it's easier to distinguish between the good and the bad. Shinra bad, what they do is bad, blah blah blah, and it's like, and then, the things that they touch upon a little bit more in the remake, when Barrett's like saying like, oh, these Shinra employees, they're complicit in all of this, right? And it's like, and then it's when Kate says and Reeve are, pleading with the team, like, look, you have to come and save the people of Midgar. When really it's like, well, no, we don't have to. and all that. So it's like that decision to be that moment where they're like, no, we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. That real proper hero moment. And then the bit afterwards when everyone leaves the high wind is like why come back? Because it's a suicide mission as far as they're concerned, right?
Yeah.
Why come back when you could spend it with your loved ones and your family? You know, Barrett, especially with Marlene, you know, like why waste that time when you're gonna just go off and die? And that camaraderie, like that's when the team really feels like the most team, because they don't always feel like they're a close knit team, especially when some of them, you know, steal from each other, they backstab each other, they beat each other up. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then the bit when the crew as well, when Sid's, you know, holding on to the controls, he's like, I can't control the highway. And all the crew comes back and they help him out. He's like, what the fuck you doing here? And he's like, no, boss, we can't leave you. He's like, you guys are stupid, dumbass shits. And he's like, but thank you. And he's like, you know, but we all go off together. You know what I mean? It's like that. Yeah, that's probably, those are my favorite moments.
That awesome. The Red 13 and Seto, that's always going to be my favorite. Just that moment. My two favorites, they're both dramatic, but they're dramatically different. You know, with Nanaki and Seto, it's just, you know, it was touching. It was heartfelt. And then the moment when Tifa wakes up in I think it was Junin. She wakes up. Yep. And the shutters are down and Barrett's like, it's been like 2 weeks or something like that. And Tifa was just like, did we stop it? And he opens up the shutters and you just see like you see Meteor like on its way, and it had like a very Armageddon feeling. And
the world map music gets like so ominous after that too.
Exactly, like everything changes. The when you're in the world map, the sky is auburn, like ambery, and the music just kind of sounds like we've been defeated type of music. It's just very like solemn and like that was dramatic because you see Meteor, the shutters open. Barrett doesn't even say any words. He's like, there's no words I can use to describe the situation that we're in. I'm just going to show you. He opens the shutters and Meteor's coming, and it's kind of like Sephiroth won. You know, you have that feeling of like the bad guy won. So I thought that was like a really dramatic moment in the story.
Mine's always going to go probably to the iconic scene, just because, you know, when playing it as a kid at like 7 years old.
Everyone. I'll never forget seeing that for the first time. Dude.
You already know where I'm going with it. Sephiroth walking through the fire, like that's just going to be the whole Nibelheim incident. And as I got older, the entire Nibelheim incident became my favorite moment, I think. But just the imagery of Sephiroth turning around and walking through the fire is probably the coolest moment in like video games for me. I love it. Obviously there's so many, as you guys touched on, so many like really dramatic and emotional moments. And like, even I love how Dan focused on even they're not small moments, but they're not moments that are like CG cutscenes or anything like that. They're really impactful moments, like Sid getting help from the whole crew reuniting on the highway and getting help, coming together as a team. God, that there's so many really good moments in 7. But I guess if
obviously
you're talking favorite, Sephiroth turning around, walking through the fire.
And speaking of iconic moments, Dan, you know how I mentioned I try to change or like my picture when I can do video based on like inside jokes and moments and stuff like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and set the one that I usually use. Speaking of
oh god, yeah, there you go.
Speaking of iconic moments.
Spoiler, I guess, for anybody who hasn't played 7. Who hasn't? we had
Well, at least you look happy. What's happening? Or was just surprised? Like, I guess. Was surprised?
It's more just wide. Yeah, it's more wide-eyed. So it's the moment. This is the moment I first feel the tip of the sword touching my back. This is like that moment.
It's cold.
It's like
it's cold.
I got a bad feeling, guys.
we need to make that picture of Reed's face, one of our Twitch emotes.
Oh my god, yes.
We got
Yeah, make it like a chat reaction, chat emote.
Yep.
You know what's
So,
funny
Dan,
is there's a
I'm
real
sorry,
quick.
go ahead.
There's a really funny theory. I don't know if you've heard this one, Dan. Well, it's funny in like a really dark way, but the theory is that Cloud actually kills Aerith. So the theory is like basically,
Is
obviously
that the theory?
Sephiroth's-
Like she wasn't dead, and by dropping her in the water.
Yeah,
that's-
he paralyzed her. He like stabbed her through the spine, like paralyzed her, and so she's like paralyzed. And Cloud's like, "Well, you're useless to us now." And just like drowns.
We can't do anything with you now.
But that theory doesn't hold up to scrutiny, because if that were true, she wouldn't have sunk, because she would have still had air in her lungs.
It's
Yeah,
true.
it's true.
It's true.
It's true.
What if he got a big rock and put it on top of her just to make sure? He's like, sorry, food on the highway's starting to run kind of low.
To put some extra strong bracelets, heavy bracelets on her.
He's like, look, I like you, Aerith, but me and Tifa have known each other for a long time, and I think I'm just gonna try that out. See ya.
So
I'll be
Dan,
back.
your job as a community manager or social media communications, you got to sell these games, right? You got to make them exciting. So for this next part, we have a little fun game for you. It's this one's gonna be a short Mad Libs here, but you're gonna have to sell this one. You're gonna have to really we're gonna give you a synopsis of a Final Fantasy, but we're gonna have you replace certain words within the synopsis. And then I will have you read back this new synopsis, and you'll have to hype it up as the community manager would do. So Vinny, since you have created this one, would you go ahead and we can even ask if you'd like, you can have chat fill in the blanks as well. They can give you suggestions. So please participate. We'll ask you for a word such as like a person, a verb, things like that. And chat can kind of chime in as well. So go ahead, Vinny.
Okay. So Daniel, you'll have to look at chat because I'm looking at my notes. I can't look at both.
Before we begin, Zombie Nug did have a question. I'm sorry. I want to get this one in there for you, Zombie. This is he says favorite song in Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I'm gonna be this. Tifa's theme will be my favorite track, but
Nice.
otherwise, oh god! But the end is so that's my go-to, because it's beautiful, and it sums up the character, and it's to me one of the most iconic tracks in all of Final Fantasy. I mean, but there's so many, right?
So, One Winged Angel, Aerith's theme.
Yeah,
I think
I mean, all the classics from 7 alone. It's
Genova.
Genova theme is by far my favorite.
I gotta say, the
Cosmo Canyon.
Phase 3, yeah, Phase 3 of Genova Dreamweaver, because it's like kind of like crescendos at Phase 3, and it finally gets you the classic Genova when that hits, and oh man, that is the most hype.
It hit because when it first started, I was like,
you're waiting for it.
So I see what they're doing. There's little subtle nods to Genova music going on, and then Phase 3 hits, and you hear the doo 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 doo. I was just like.
In the timing as well, in that considering
so
what's going on, what's actually going on in the game and in the battle, it's just like
It's so good.
But that's the thing,
so
actually,
Tifa's
with I mean, got to give props to the whole 7 remake soundtrack though, because doing what they did with the originals, and it's just phenomenal work. I mean, I had before it came out, I had doubts they would be able to pull it off, but they went above and beyond as far as I'm.
Oh, it was absolutely so good. Barrett's hometown song is underrated, is what Zombie says. No, I do like. I do like
Coral.
Coral.
Coral that kills people.
Is it Coral or Corel?
I thought it Coral.
I've always called it Coral.
Me too, but it's Corel, right?
I thought AL.
Is it AL? I thought it was EL. Anyway, that's unimportant.
It's so we'll go back to the Mad Libs portion here. Zombie, Stay.
It is
active if you
Cora
want,
with an
and
E.
You can give your suggestions as well.
My bad.
All right, go ahead, Vinny.
All right. So
That's okay, Dan. We had Square-Enix, and we had.
Yeah.
We're always
Titus.
gonna pronounce it. We're always gonna pronounce it like we did as a kid. Like for
Yeah.
example, as a kid,
I-
I always called her Aries.
Yeah,
So like
or,
when they
or
changed,
Mako.
yeah, and
Oh
Mako.
yeah, I always, to be honest, I
I-
used to say Mako.
I said Mako too. When I first heard it in the remake, I was just like,
Like
Oh.
the shark man.
yeah, I was like, Mako. I was like, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Bad lips back.
Okay, so we need a person.
So wait a minute. Can
What
you
was
run through the rules with me again?
Okay.
Okay, so this is okay. This is just going to be a synopsis. It's a really short synopsis of a Final Fantasy game.
Oh, so I just give suggestions for what?
Yeah, just give suggestions. And
Yeah,
Whatever.
we're
for
gonna
the person.
replace. So if we ask for a noun, we're gonna replace a noun from the synopsis of the game with the noun that you give us.
Okay.
And then you're gonna
okay.
read through it with all the janky wording put in and
Okay.
Yeah,
place. So it's
the
gonna be all over the
wild, the
place.
more wild the word, the more funny the word, the better. And then
Okay.
also, after you read it, you'll have to tell us what game it is.
Okay.
Yeah, you gotta guess what game it was.
Right. Okay. So was it a name? A name was what I wanted.
Yeah, a person, and it doesn't have to be from Final Fantasy. It could be a fan favorite. Apparently, it's Rosie O'Donnell. But yeah, it could be
Or
anything
Dwayne
you
Rock
want.
Johnson. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. Olong Johnson.
Yes.
Olong Johnson.
That's incredible.
Vinny, are you filling this in?
Yes.
Okay, good.
All right, and now I
And
need
then-
a verb.
Time to judge Vinny's spelling.
He's not in our group though, or not in.
Fisting, or to fist. What?
No, that's perfect.
It's like
That's
punching.
great.
It's like punching.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay, so now I need an event.
Final.
Armageddon.
All right, and now I need a thing.
Oh, actually, no. Okay, forget it. I was going to change my last one, but never mind.
You can change it if you like.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Brexit.
Brexit.
Brexit as the event. Let's make the I'll
There
rep
we go.
my home country.
Yeah, this is gonna be the UK Final Fantasy UK synopsis.
I
Now
hope
I
it's
need
really tragic.
Just like a Brexit.
now I need a thing.
An onion.
The humble onion. It's like he's finally like, yeah, it's my time to shine.
I need a verb ending in ing.
Launching.
Right.
And
And
then,
then
yeah, you already got the person.
yep, and then I need an adjective.
Gracefully.
All right,
I'm coming up with my own story with my words in my head now.
All right, I'm gonna change gracefully to graceful because that'll
Oh
fit
yeah.
evenly.
So-
Okay, so now I'm gonna send this to you, Daniel.
Okay, I was gonna say you know how to send it in on Zoom, but I can take it as well.
Well, I'd have to. You want me to type it into the chat? All right. You guys talk amongst yourselves while I type this because it's probably gonna take like a minute.
Oh, you can't just highlight.
I'm
I
on
think
my
you wrote
phone.
it down.
I'm on my phone. I said that in the beginning.
Oh,
yeah,
got
that's
you.
why I
Okay.
can't look at chat unless you want me to just send it to you.
Yeah, send it to me in the Facebook message, and then I'll send it. That'll work.
Alrighty.
All right, so this is going to be a synopsis of a brand new Final Fantasy game coming out. That
This is actually the remake. The
This is
remake
a-
of the original
Remake.
synopsis.
Yeah, Final Fantasy UK.
this is,
Well, yeah, it's like.
Oh man, yeah, I should have done more British stuff. I should have had
Yeah.
context.
Kafka's Boris Johnson and like Brexit is like the world being destroyed.
Yeah, sounds
That's
about
like
right.
the climactic final chapter is Brexit.
All right, here we go. Dan, I'm going to send it in the Zoom meeting, and you'll see it.
Did you say Olin Johnson, like Olan?
Oh.
I don't actually know how you spell it, but
Yeah, Olong Johnson. It's Olong. It's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I spelt it wrong, but you guys get it.
Oh yeah, I got it.
It's
So do I read it out loud now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Once we share it, and you gotta put like the marketing flair on it, like you're trying to hype it up.
Okay. Okay, so I gotta sell this afterwards.
Yeah, do we have it shared? I don't see it.
Do we have a website?
I was asking Danny if he had shared the screen.
Oh yeah, I sent it.
Yeah,
I sent it
he shared it to me.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if we were doing it on the screen.
Okie dokie. So, the story follows Olong Johnson, a highborn cadet who finds himself fisting into the middle of an intricate Brexit known as the Onion, where two opposing noble factions are launching the throne of the kingdom. As the story progresses, Olong Johnson and his allies discover a graceful plot behind the wall.
It's a very graceful plot behind the wall.
Graceful fisting. Graceful fisting.
So,
Yeah,
so Dan, you gotta say what game this is. You gotta guess.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Which Final Fantasy?
Well, the cadet also automatically makes you think 8, but let's see. Okay, so it's cadet finds himself in the middle of a thing. No, it's a thing. He's in the middle of Brexit. A faction of Brexit known as the Onion, with two opposing noble factions. Noble factions launching a throne of a.
Yeah, I think this is a good choice too, Vinny, for a title, because it's kind of a tricky one. Because we haven't even discussed it.
No, I don't believe so.
Oh God, I'm not sure. Yeah, because I think
into the middle of an intricate Brexit.
Yeah, he's fisting all the way right all the way up to the middle,
all the way to the top.
Yeah.
I think that's the best verb we've ever gotten on this. It's right up there with squatting.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
You're just gonna squat there.
Okay, so there's a war and there's two king. One king. I actually don't know. I gotta think. Okay, let's see.
Can we give him one hint? Because I gotta.
Yeah, we can give him a hint. We'll give him
we'll give you a lifeline. Yeah, it's not mainline.
It's not numbered.
It's not numbered. Oh,
not
okay,
numbered.
okay. Tactics.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Awesome. Well done, Dan.
Tactics. You gotta tactically fist. Well, there is the monk class. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the monk class. You punch. You're fighting with your fists. You're just going around fisting everything in sight.
That's what monks do.
Yeah.
For the good of the onion.
Yeah.
Or Onion Knight.
Well, we're obviously. I'm good to keep talking as long as you want to keep talking, Dan. Because obviously, this is awesome to have you on the show. I really enjoyed hearing your stories. So from this point on, it's up to your discretion. I don't want to, hold you too much longer than you were anticipating. But if you don't mind, I would love to know a little bit about what you're up to now. We talked a lot about Square-Enix and your time at Square-Enix. Obviously, you can't talk too much about what you're doing now, obviously, but you're now at WB Games as the social media communications, international social media and communication manager. So if you care to tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, and we'll close it out.
Yeah, I'd love to. I am, working on, as I mentioned, like at the beginning, helping our local territories and our offices with their social media activities for basically, all the Warner Bros. Games titles. So if you would all like to pre-order Back for Blood, Lego Star Wars: A Skywalker Saga, Gotham Knights, Suicide Squads, Kill the Justice League, and Hogwarts Legacy, that would really help me out. So yeah,
Yeah. All of those
it's
games, I'm like, I'm extremely excited for. I'm a
Yeah,
huge
wow.
fan of Arkham Knight. Yeah, so I'm really excited for the next Rocksteady game, obviously, and then also, we mentioned even earlier we were talking about Valve releasing their threes, and we were like, well, Left 4 Dead 3 is probably not going to happen, but Back for Blood is basically the spiritual successor of Left 4 Dead, and man, I can't wait to get my hands on that one. That's gonna be so
hey,
exciting.
it's so good. It is so good. I spent a lot of time playing Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, and yeah, Back for Blood is so much fun. I take it you weren't we ran a closed alpha back in December,
Yeah,
which I
that was
played.
only on Steam, if I'm correct, right? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have a computer like powerful enough to do those kind of things. So, yeah. Once it hits consoles, though, man, I'll be jumping on. If we do get a beta for Back for Blood, I will definitely be jumping on the beta or just buying it. I'm just really excited. Me and my friends are gonna love that. We played a lot of Left 4 Dead 2. So yeah, man, so many exciting things coming from WB Games.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's funny actually because after leaving Square, this is one of the most weird cosmic ironies. The first game I worked on was Hitman 2, and obviously IO used to belong to Square. They were owned by Square, so it's like I had to leave the company to work on that franchise. And yeah, it's just there's so many cool things we got in the pipeline at WB. So many. Well, I mean, all of our games look so good, and I can't wait for people to be able to play them. Back for Blood, especially because that's so much fun, so much fun. And that's coming out. Well, before we know it, I say that I'm like, oh, that means like, my work is gonna get very very busy.
Yeah. Really cool, man. Well, Dan, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been a lot of fun. If anything, man, it has just been a blast to talk about Final Fantasy with you.
Fanboy it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, fanboying about it too. That
Actually,
it's just
if I can go full circle on one thing really fast, so we're taking fan questions. This is my fan question. So I've alluded to it. We were kind of fanboying over anime and stuff before the show started. So I'm going to put you on the spot now. Last thing I'll do. What is your all-time favorite anime?
King of the Hill.
All right, I'm out. I thought he's turning the
Yeah,
around. I'm out.
just Dan Seto has left the call.
Oh, my connection. I'm losing. I got disconnected.
Can you hear me? Oh, they just doing the static noises.
Mine's Pokemon. I'm just kidding.
SpongeBob's a pretty good
That's
anime.
legit.
Mine is Death Note.
Yeah, the thing you see, because I'm not that well versed in anime. I must release. The thing is, when it comes to TV shows and like films, the kind of things that I watch and I'll love. But the thing is, I have a hard time like remembering things from them and like things I've watched and things.
That's why they're memes. Memes help you remember. So
true.
JoJo, basically.
And like, yeah, because in games I could remember everything like I played as a kid, but
right.
everything I watched from anime wise, I guess I think, what, I've not watched it since I was a kid, but I remember the first anime I watched and got into was, back in the day we had to buy them on VHS because there was no internet and they were never on TV, was a show an anime called New Dominion Tank Police, which no one remembers, but I loved it and I would pay good money for a re-release on that, but I don't think it's available.
That's awesome.
But otherwise, I think if for something that I guess more that people might actually know, I probably say something like Fullmetal Alchemist, or maybe Death Note, because they're it's the ones that when you get asked of like what if you're not into anime, what should you watch first? And those are like the ones that I always think of first, and I'm like then I may have like more recent favorites. Like at the moment, I've been watching JoJo back to back, and I love JoJo. got into Haikyuu. Haikyuu's amazing.
Mhm.
And some more recent shows, but I think, like Full Metal Alchemist is probably the classic that I would like watch again and recommend to everyone. And funny story, actually, this actually comes full circle. Actually, back for another funny story, because I didn't realize this, but in Japan, Square-Enix publish anime and manga as well.
Mhm.
And I remember going into the office. I can't remember what for. And normally in our offices, the meeting rooms are all named after games or franchises, right? So in the Square Enix Europe office that I used to be in, we had rooms for there were, and then they were titled. There was the Final Fantasy meeting room, there's Kingdom Hearts, Life is Strange, Just Cause, etc. And in this meeting in Japan, I went into a meeting room called the Full Metal Alchemist room, and it was cool because it had like little kind of Full Metal Alchemist kind of like icons along the walls, not anything garish, just kind of subtle, like kind of, I guess, debossed kind of graphics of Alphonse and some other things. And I was like, why is this called the Full Metal Alchemist room? It was like, oh yeah, and they were like, oh yeah, we made this. And we were like, what? I had no idea until then.
That's awesome.
If
Full circle.
my favorite anime, like all around, is probably The Disastrous Life of Psyche K.
Oh my god.
Because it's like a self-aware anime that makes fun of other like anime tropes, and it explains like, the anime hair and like just like all these other things, but it's a comedy and it's absolutely hilarious. And if you want to take a break from like all the action and drama animes, The Disastrous Life of Psyche K is hysterical. So that's definitely a suggestion.
If you like that, you definitely need to watch Gintama.
I've never heard of that one.
Oh, I have one question.
It's like one of the longest running anime ever, if not the other than One Piece.
I have a question that's more a little more of a personal question. I personally just want to be in the game industry. That's a goal of mine, a dream of mine. It was to join the industry to get into E3. But thankfully, that actually opened up to the public, and I was actually able to get in there by buying tickets and got to do press conferences, which was a dream come true. I got to
Which one did you go to?
I got to Xbox Fan Fest
Nice.
during E3 2019, and so it was just like how you said it was really cool that your first E3 was the announcement of Remake. And my dream of going to E3, my first E3 was actually being able to be one of the first that played Final Fantasy VII Remake, the actual gameplay demo.
Nice.
Yeah, I went all in. My wife was like, she's like, "This is your dream. Go all in." So I bought the VIP passes, so I got to share the floor with industry, and was second or third wave that played Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Nice. And that means if you were at the Xbox conference, that means you got to see Keanu Reeves come out on stage, right?
Yeah. I was so FanFest. The FanFest members got to sit in like the first, like I think it was like 5 rows, like the first 5 rows of the entire theater, and we were only like 4 rows, and we sat on the right side. So like we were sitting on the right side looking at the stage.
That's where he comes out, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's where he like I'm like watching the trailer, and like my friend Greg, he hits me on the shoulder a bunch of times, and I'm like, "What's up, man?" I was looking at the screen, and then I looked down, and there's like Keanu Reeves walking up, and it was, I mean, he was, it looks like a big distance when you're looking at it on the live stream, but he was like right there.
Yeah.
the guy who shouted, "You're breathtaking," he was only a row in front of me to the left. Like he was literally right in front of me when he said, "You're breathtaking." So
you could imagine that Keanu Reeves was actually pointing at you when you said, "No, you're breathtaking."
Exactly. And that, that's what I like to think. Oh man, it was so good. That whole experience was just an incredible experience. Not to go on too long about it. I don't want to bore you with it, I guess, but I got to meet Phil Spencer. I literally met him 3 times because through FanFest, through our VIP passes, he did an exclusive CEO talk with us.
That's cool. I didn't realize he did that. That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. The CEO of ZeniMax, actually, who sadly passed away, he was there, so I actually got to meet him too, which was now learning of the news just earlier this week. I was like, man, that's I talked to him. I gave him my business card, like all this other stuff, and he's trying to. He even introduced me to his one of his team members, and like, oh yeah, please talk to her, and maybe we'll be in contact. But nothing ever panned out. But that was really cool moment, and so I got to meet Phil. I got to meet a lot of people. Alana Pierce. I got to meet Rod Ferguson, the guy who was doing Gears at the time. Just a really cool experience, and then also won the Bethesda conference as well. So I got to go to Bethesda conference, which was a party basically. that was just a party, man. Like it was crazy. You had the conference, and then they had this huge open area and free hot dogs, corn on the cob on the grill, and all this other stuff. It
Was Zell there?
was Zell there? No,
in spirit. In spirit.
Yeah, in spirit. It was a fantastic time. But I guess to circle back to my question, yeah, that was my life goal. The dream was to get to go to E3 through joining the industry. But I still haven't given up on the idea of being part of the industry. So I guess my question to you would be basically just, do you have any advice for anybody like me who would want to be in this industry? Even, I never thought I would be making a game. You know what I mean? So when I say want to be part of the game industry, I never considered myself on the development side of things.
You're on the publishing, yeah.
Exactly. I considered myself, in fact, in your role. I just never knew really what the role was called. So yeah. So do you have any advice? Anything to add on to that?
Yeah. Well, this is probably worth a whole another podcast in itself. Yeah, there's lots I could talk about. I think instead of waffling on for ages, I think there's a couple of key things. There's a couple of things that really I think would really help, and some of them it might sound obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people don't consider these things. The first one is know what you're getting into, because especially for social media and community management, it's not as easy as it looks. And like with any job in any discipline, I should say, it requires a certain level of skill, and you will need skilled to do it. That's not to say that the thing is, there's the ongoing joke that anyone can do it, and that is true. I mean, I'm living proof. I was not trained in either of these disciplines, or in PR, which what I was before I joined Square-Enix. I actually studied molecular biology in university, so I have a science degree, which obviously had nothing to do with what I do, except for the practical skills of analytics and whatnot that should come with a degree in science. But so what I mean is, when I say it's the joke that anyone can do it, it's the joke that whenever a brand posts something on social media, it's like, oh, well done, social media intern. It's that joke that's that makes the role seem unskilled when it is highly skilled. You can learn those skills on the way, but so this is the thing. So when you apply, or when you think about going into a role of community management or social media management, which are, again, a lot of people don't realize, are two separate disciplines. They're two separate roles. In games, it's often bunched into one because there is some overlap, but no more overlap than social media has with PR or marketing. So it's a lot of companies just put them into one, so you're effectively doing two people's job. But so it's important to realize, that whichever one you go for or want to specialize in, or what have you think, just be aware that they are two different things that require some crossover, two different skills. The important thing is to know what you'll actually be doing in that job. Do some research, figure out what that job actually entails. Does it mean, if you're doing social media management, for example, are you going to be creating assets to be used on social media? Are you going to be moderating channels, or something else? You're going to be doing other things on other channels. You're exploring. How do you come up with strategy? And for that's like kind of business terms for like, what are your goals? How are you going to do it? So, let's say, for example, for Final Fantasy 15, let's say the strategy was to, like, the tempo was to surpass, let's just say something lofty, like surpass Final Fantasy 7. So how do you do that? That is the strategy. Like, how do you get to that? So that's the thing, like your community management or social media, how can you come up with a plan? Do you just, it's not just being on Twitter and posting memes all day, although that could be part of your strategy, So, and in community management, are you going to be on Discord? Are you going to be talking to people? Are you going to be going out and recruiting people? You're going to be finding small time like artists to be able to bring them. You're going to be creating community ambassadors, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like a lot of people think when they go into these giant kind of jobs that, one, like I said, it's easy and you just go in there and then you just talk to people all day, but there's a lot more to it, and figuring out what that is. And the annoying thing is that it will be different for every company you apply to. So it's like, look at the job specs, look at what they're actually asking you to do, and figuring out what the job actually is, and whether you actually want to do it, because it is not for everybody, because there are unfortunate negative downsides, mostly to do with mental health issues because of the shit that you have to deal with,
toxicity in the communities. Yeah.
Exactly, and all that kind of stuff is like, it's sad, because you shouldn't have to have thick skin, but it will really help if you had thick skin and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's not necessarily part of. I'm going on a tangent now. So yeah, know what the roles are.
Yeah.
And then on the back of that, this is the big one. This is the one that I always tell everyone. Apply. Just apply for the job. So many people see the job spec and be like, oh, no, I can't do that. But I'm like, but you want to do it. And he's like, and I'm like, so what are you here for? What are you doing? Right? So it's like, the way I got into all of my jobs, to put my foothold into the games industry was a little bit different. It was actually, but it was still just applying. But I discovered it through a tweet. Actually, it was for a PR agency, and my best friend saw it, and she knew the person in the agency, so she put my name forward and recommended me, and that's how I got in. But really, it was just applying. Square-Enix, I just applied. Warner Bros. Games, I just applied. And that's the one thing that people don't do. They can't, and that's the thing. Like, if you don't apply, how are you going to get the job? It sounds dumb, but that's it. And attached to that, unfortunately, there is an unfortunate thing that it's more complicated than people assume. But whenever you see like these job specs, there's a lot of the time, they ask for like 3 years experience for like an entry level role, or 5 years experience for this. And the important thing is just ignore it. Just ignore that. Apply anyway. You have nothing to lose, so just apply. And the important thing to remember, the reason why it's there is usually because the team, like the team is probably quite small. A lot of these companies are a lot smaller than people realize. So there's only like a couple of people. You got a game coming out. You don't have the time to train people from scratch. So you just need someone to at least sort of hit the ground running and only train little bits on the way, because no one has the time to train them up. And that's because they don't have headcounts to hire more people, blah, blah, blah. So whatever, it's not just to get, rinse people for money, although that probably is for some companies. But the important thing is that is not the be all end all. And whenever I've been involved in hiring people, that is always we always put that in. That's always put in there by HR. But the hiring managers never really look at it, because what it is more than actually stipulating you have to have this amount of experience is it's a filter. Because if you see that and you say, I don't have 5 years experience, I'm not going to apply, what you are signaling to the company and to yourself is you can't do the job, or you don't believe you can do the job, which I guess is more important. And if you don't believe you can do it, then you're not going to, one, you're probably not going to enjoy it. And two, you're going to struggle and the stress and all that kind of stuff. So you have to have the self-confidence to believe you can do it. And you just look at, all you have to do is ignore that, look at a job spec, figure out what exactly they're asking and say, can I do this? Yes or no? Yes, yes, yes. But, do it. Then just apply. And if you don't have the experience, go and get it. And when I say go get the experience, that doesn't mean that you have to have that exact job and do that exact job. You don't have to already be a social media manager to apply for a social media manager job, even though it says like get 5 experience. Again, look at what the job's asking of you and find ways to show that you can do that thing. So if, for example, if the social media management job is to manage social media accounts, do something where you can do that, whether that be start a podcast or live stream, a fan site, like you already have, like you've got this.
I'd be remiss to say that starting this podcast is obviously a step. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what it should be. And if you didn't have that, then start one. If you're being a community manager, get involved in communities, get involved in like some Discords, become a moderator, moderate those channels, set up a fan group, organize stuff. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're not going to get paid for this. Yes, it may not lead anywhere, but at the same time, if you really want to go the distance, you're going to have to do it in some way, shape, or form. And it could be a side hustle. I say side hustle, probably not going to be paid for it, but what I mean. So like you can do it in your free time, your lunch breaks from your regular job. But that's what I mean when it's like you don't have to actually do the job to have that experience. On the internet, there are so many ways to show that you can do the job that's being asked for. Like when I applied for my role in PR, like I didn't do PR. I kind of knew what it was. I did some research and figured out what the job was doing. But then I just looked at, my current CV. I worked at retail at the time. So it's like, so what's the PR spec? It was an entry-level role. And basically, if I remember correctly, the gist of it was kind of like, you're going to have to communicate to press, influencers and content creators weren't a thing back then. But, you'll be talking to the press and convincing them about your game. And I'm like, well, I do that every day because I worked in game retail and I was, convincing people to buy a game. So it's like, that's obviously not a direct thing with PR, but it's the same skill. It's still talking to people and convincing them why they should buy or cover your game. So it's things like that. And everybody has life experience that you can extrapolate into almost any job. You just have to be able to know how to word it properly and how to sell yourself in that respect, to make it known. And my final bit of advice is start small. If you want to get your foot in the door, you're very unlikely going to be able to walk up to Bethesda's office and be like, hey, give me a job, even if it's an entry-level role. It's like, hey, give me a job. It could happen, but you're much more likely, and there's much more vast opportunities if you look elsewhere. Look at smaller studios, look at indie studios, and like I said, like I started off in a PR agency. That is a great place to go. Look for PR agencies, social media agencies, creative agencies, because they will get your foot in the door. Because by nature of agencies, they work with a lot of clients. And if they happen to be in the gaming space, they work with a lot of games publishers. So you'll get to network a lot. You'll get to, see a lot more. And in terms of actual practical working experience, there are 2 ways to get the fastest experience in the shortest amount of time possible. One is working in an agency. because of the nature, because you're working with so many different clients and they'll ask you to do so many different things, within the field, that you will it's great because you get to touch and handle so many different things. So talking from my own experience, when I worked in the PR agency, we worked with Warner Brothers. They were one of our clients. So I worked on the UK PR for Arkham City. We worked with 2K. So I worked on Borderlands 2. We worked with THQ back in the day. So I worked on like Saints Row the Third. I worked with some indie studios. I worked with Sega on Sonic All Stars Racing. So it's like you'll get so much experience from that.
Yeah.
And the other one, which is a lot harder and a lot riskier, but is to work in a startup. Find like a tech startup or something. And that is obviously risky because startups aren't guaranteed to last. And you won't have much guidance. You're literally going to have to be learning. You have to be very self-motivated and learning on the go on yourself, because everybody's in a similar position to you. So you're like, well, what are we doing? We don't know. You just got to figure it out as you go along. Yeah. But the bonus on that is that there is no faster way to progress up a career ladder than at a startup, because you have to. Because one, you have to be pushing off. You have to do the work, because otherwise you're going to lose your job and the company's going to go under. But also because you're the only one there, well, as soon as you bring on someone else, you're de facto going to have to move up the ladder. So because you're going to have to start leading that team, because you've been there and you've been trained and blah, 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 blah. So, and that's actually true for people within any industry at the moment already as well, because there's a unfortunate circumstance right now. Circumstance is the wrong word. Situation where, due to generations and people working longer, not retiring, it can be difficult to progress up within a company, because you can't progress because the person above you is still there. So unless they leave, you can't progress. So you have to move to a different company to get a promotion. That's fairly common, unfortunately, in games and outside games. In employment in general. But you go to so if you're in like a middle management level role and you want to go to like a senior or even further, like director level, you join a startup, boom, you're going to have to climb that naturally. It's part of that. Again, risks involved and whatnot. So yes, those are my tips in a very roundabout. I'm not sure if they were very specific or really that helpful.
No,
but
I really appreciated it. I thought they were really good, because when you think about especially the application one, when they're saying like you need a certain amount of experience, I think in my mindset and maybe a lot of other people's mindset, when you see that, you're just kind of like, oh, if I get into the interview and they say you check that you hit it, or like you did this, like where is it at, and then you're just like, I didn't. I don't really. You know what I mean? Like,
well, that's it. That's the thing where you've got to kind of not blag, but
yeah.
blag.
Obviously, I'd spin it and just be like, oh yeah, I've done a podcast for so long. I do all the graphics and stuff like that. I'm graphic designer and all those. And you can kind of spin it towards you to make it work for you. But I think the fear, I guess, is getting into the interview and then they're kind of calling you out on it, and you're just like,
actually, you just brought off a really good bit of advice I have for that kind of situation. So when you're doing the application, everything should feed into the next stage. So when you have your CV or your resume, the purpose of that is not to say everything you've done, although that is what a lot of CVs are. The purpose of the CV is to get enough interest that they'll want to speak to you, aka interview you. So it's kind of like a breadcrumb trail. So you're like, hey, here's my CV, and they read it like, oh, okay, he's done this kind of thing, or they've done this kind of thing. Let's see, and this sounds interesting. Let's give an interview so we can talk about that. They can talk about that a bit more. And then when you're in an interview, the next stage is, after the first stage interview, usually it's like a practical element, right? Like where they give you a brief and you have to do a task or whatever they ask you. So you want to get into that. So instead of in an interview, now again, this varies from job to job, interview to interview, or person to person, depending on what you feel comfortable with. But I recommend at this stage what you should be doing is not necessarily talking about completely about what you've done, your achievements, because ultimately what an employer wants to know is what you can do for them, right? That's why they want to hire you. So spin it to be like, okay, if the question was like, if the social media manager was like, oh, how have you grown your social media channels? To be like, okay, well, we do these things, like, we do regular podcasts and streams to keep people engaged and keep people doing the timings. But what I would do for your channels is this, this, and this. So it's like, so you're spinning it, so you're already thinking, like, this is what I want to do for you. And then that automatically puts them in the mind, okay, they're thinking ahead. And then if you come up with some good ideas, okay, there is the risk they'll just steal those ideas and just do it without you.
Yeah, right.
And that's the same with all interviews. I know it's illegal, but people still do it, right? But that's the thing. Then you give them a breadcrumb trail to be like, this is the kind of thing I'm thinking about for your channel. So here's your strengths and weaknesses from my perspective and how I would address and change that, blah, blah, blah. And they'll be thinking, ooh, that sounds good. That sounds smart. Okay, we're going to give him the brief and actually see what he would actually literally do. Then you complete the brief, present it, and if it's good enough, then you go into then hopefully you'll get a job offer, right?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate all of that advice. In fact, if you don't mind, I would, I'll try and keep in touch with you and get, for any more advice and stuff like that. I would really appreciate that. But yeah, so if you to close out the show, if you would like to tell people where they can find you and stuff like that, like Twitter handles and stuff like that.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. My handle is @DMSeto, SETO. And yeah, hopefully, I try to. One thing what I learned after my job at Square is that maybe I shouldn't be spending so much time on social media, but I do make an effort to reply to everyone who messages me and whatnot. So if I'm a bit slow, sorry.
Well, really appreciate you taking a big chunk of your Saturday to be with us. I do. Obviously, your time is valuable, and spending it with us is very. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot. I mean, just hanging out, fanboying with you, just nerding out. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's a nice break for you. Obviously, you're a community leader, so I mean, you're getting to just hang out with people who want to be in that community position as well. So it's like it's pretty neat, So no, we really appreciate it, man.
No, it's been great. I've had a blast. Sorry if I got a bit preachy towards the end.
Oh, no.
No, not a problem.
Yeah,
we're here to listen to you.
Exactly. We bring you on the show so we can hear you talk, right? Obviously, you know what I mean? I love.
Yeah, you'll regret that eventually. Maybe not this time.
We'll get you a little drink or two so you can really go on.
I was about to say we'll have to bring you back and have a few drinks ready, so we can just like progressively go to trash tier commentary.
I did have something before we close out the show, because we hit our goal of 300 subscribers on YouTube. I believe we're sitting at 308 right now, and we said we would do a giveaway at 300. So this is the music box, the Aerith music box that we'd be giving away. It plays the theme. I think it's going the correct way. Can you hear that?
Yeah. That is cool. Can I get one? Otherwise, I have to enter the competition now. Oh.
So, we're not 100% sure on what the best way to do it is. I'm thinking we are going to do it on a live stream to anyone who is subscribed to the channel, following Twitch. Now, I don't know if we should just do random number generator. We put the list of people in and we hit roll and the computer just spins and picks somebody.
Yeah, long story short, we'll figure that out behind the scenes, but believe us when we say that we will do it, and probably during a live stream.
Probably a live stream. Like just last week we gave away and if you haven't read this book, it's amazing. Dan, you would love it as a Final Fantasy fan, Final Fantasy VII fan. It's called The Norse Myths That Inspired Final Fantasy VII. Wait, you know MJ Gallagher. I feel
Yeah,
like-
yeah, I know.
Oh yeah, come on, that's how we got in touch. So yeah, MJ Gallagher, we gave away his book. It was a signed copy, and it was given away on Twitch during a live stream. So we might do something like that. We might say like, hey, if you want to enter in the into the contest, please tune in at certain time, and we'll just literally just be a live stream just to give away that. But we
If
just
if you
wanted to-
comment, I like Reed's jokes, you
like
automatically
Reed's
get put
jokes.
you get put to the top of the
You
list.
get 2 entries.
We just wanted to say thank you guys for helping us hit that mark, and we're going to keep on pushing forward. We're at 308, as Vinny said, and we're going to keep on pushing forward. We want to get more subscribers so we can continue to have amazing guests like Dan. And this has been a really exciting one for me, just because this is Dan that has been in it. You're on the
You're
other
living
side of
Danny's
things.
best life.
You're living the life I wanted to have.
It's still time.
Still
Still
one.
time.
Yeah, still one.
So it was really exciting for me to kind of hear from the industry side of things. We have talked to voice actors, which was awesome, community members, but it's been been a goal to get on the Square-Enix side of things, or the industry side of things,
And
and wish you the best of luck with WB Games. Huge future, I guess, just an awesome future ahead of WB Games. I'm really excited for all the games coming out over there. We could literally do a podcast, WB Fan TV. It will be the next one. Yeah, we could do one on that one as well. But yes, so thank you so much, Dan. Really appreciate it. Vinny, Reed, it has been a pleasure. Thank you guys for joining as well.
I had a great time.
This
always a blast.
has been Final Podcast. Thank you so much for watching.